Good morning. How's everybody going? Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through okay? Let me know if you're out there. If this transmission is broadcasting effectively. So welcome to the Mirror Point where reality checks itself. And today's debate topic is are qualia real or a philosophical illusion or a real illusion, or however you want to put it. Is qualia a real thing? Is it a thing? A lot of people deny qualia. It's denied. So when someone says like qualia are a real illusion, they're usually just expressing a view associated with the philosophers like Daniel Dennett. And the idea is that the feeling that we have private intrinsic qualities of experience is itself a cognitive illusion, you may say, produced by the brain, right? So I'm kind of going to go into that. But just to let you know, qualia refers to the subjective qualities of experience. What it feels like to see red, taste chocolate, hear music, or feel pain. These are the raw features of conscious life that seems immediate and present to us. But here's where the debate really gets interesting. Some philosophers argue that qualia reveal a deep mystery about the nature of consciousness. If science can fully describe the brain in physical terms, like say neurons, electrical signals, chemical processes, why does any of that produce an inner experience at all? So this question sort of became famous through what philosophers like Mr. David Chalmers would call the hard problem of consciousness. You know, I've been talking about that shit forever. But everyone does, or not everyone, I would say, sorry, not everyone agrees that qualia are real. Philosophers like Daniel Dennett, like I say, argue that it's a confused philosophical concept. And so according to this view, once we properly understand how the brain processes all that information, the idea of this, you know, mysterious inner qualitative property will just disappear. So this morning, I'm just asking a fundamental question. Are qualia genuine features of reality that science has yet to explain? Or are they simply an illusion created by how we talk about our experience? And so we're going to get into it. We're going to have guests call in, and we're going to debate the issue. And I may have a special guest with me this morning. Very popular YouTuber himself who's interested in these topics and likes the show, and he's been on the show before, and hopefully he'll be in it. So I'm going to be right back, and we are going to get into this stuff here in a second. I am back, everybody. Welcome to the show. And we're going to discuss qualia here. We're going to discuss the concept. And please tune in. I'm going to bring a special guest on board. Then I'm going to bring someone who's also backstage ready to debate. Our resident contrarian, Mr. Joel. Love you, man. I'm going to bring you on in just a second. Let me introduce my special guest today. Mr. Biscuit Speaks. What's going on, brother? Glad to see you, man. It's been a while.
What's up, family? How you doing?
We're doing it, man. We're doing it. Hey, I just want to let you know, and I've been promoting, and I don't know if you want to say this on, if you don't want to answer or whatever, let me know.
I'm hearing some kind of music. Is that on your end?
Yeah, that's on my end. A
Oh,
little
okay.
background. Yeah, just a little back. Is it too loud? Let me know if it's too loud.
No. I just have a weird, my brain is weird. I get distracted easy. Hang on one sec. All right.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah, I'm having me some coffee too. Cheers, brother.
Yeah, buddy.
Yes, sir. And we're gonna do some more reactions. I actually tried to contact you a little while ago to do a reaction on that one idea you had about I think it was Jay Garfield and Bernardo Castro.
Jay Garfield and Bernardo. Yeah, we were supposed to watch that again together. Man, I get so busy and tied up with things. It's nuts.
Yeah, I sent you the email and I was like, well, he never responded. God damn it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So I went ahead and reacted to it anyways. But anyways, one question I had, and I just wanted to give you some props. There was a call in to the line by Logan for idealism as God, right? And the voice sounded just like you, and I wasn't sure if that was you or not. And I don't know if you want to expose that or not, if it was, but
I actually have no clue. I would have no problem exposing it if it was me, but I have no clue. I listen. I smoke a little bit of Zaz. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you may have.
Yeah. I'm a man of a certain age, and I do, certain things, I do mind-altering substances, let's say. So yeah, I might have hopped on. I really don't remember. I don't think that I've debated using this camera. Like, was I live? Like, you didn't see me. It was just
it was a call in.
Yeah, so I usually wouldn't do a call in unless I'm like in this setting, in my office setting.
I see.
Otherwise, I use like Discord or Clubhouse when I do debates.
Gotcha.
And those are, typically vocal only.
That voice sounded exactly like you, so I was just assuming it was you.
I mean, look, if the guy did good, then I'll claim it.
He did really well. Yeah, he did really well. And it actually I promoted it. There's this other channel called Alex K and Reality Gone Mental. And they're like a debate channel where they challenge physicalists to call in. And they have all these big debates on TikTok and YouTube. They blast it out everywhere. And the dude was he saw my channel because I thought it was you. And so I reacted to it. And, and then he discovered it from there. Anyways, it got a lot of traction. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Joel, who can kind of share his view and see if he wants to maybe challenge us on this. The debate topic is, are qualia real, or is it just a philosophical illusion? And I know that we have to break down what do we mean by illusion and qualia, and it gets nuanced, but I just wanted to make a very simple title. So anyways, if you want to, I'm going to open the floor for maybe you, if you'd like, because I don't want to do all this. I do all the talking too much. I feel like I'm a chatterbox, man.
I feel like that too.
Yeah, I know. It happens when you're running these channels, because
it does. Yeah, it's like,
that's all you got.
Yeah. So
you got to fill the line. Somebody got to do it.
Right.
So I'm going to bring my man Joel on, and we'll go ahead and get into it. I bring him on now. Hey, Joel, how you doing, sir?
Hey, what's up, guys? Good morning.
Hey, doing good, man. How you doing this morning, brother?
I'm all right. I'm getting there. I appreciate you letting me pop on real quick. I may have something planned this afternoon. We'll see what happens.
Okay, no worries.
Plans are like that. But anyways, good to speak to you. Good to meet you, Mr. Biscuits.
Yeah, man, good to meet you, buddy. For sure.
All right. Well, I didn't really have anything too contrary to add yet here, because, well, for one thing, y'all haven't said much. I don't even know what Mr. Biscuit thinks. But what I was going to encourage right away As you said, the definitions are important, but what I think is important here, not just to say what do we mean by qualia and what do we mean by illusion, but to also say when we say that something's real, what do we mean then? When we say that something exists, what do we mean? When we call something a thing, what are we saying? And I think often that's the side of it that gets the real short end of the stick on attention. In terms of the semantics of it is, you'll define qualia and then people might say, well, I think it's real. And someone says, what, are you crazy? But really they think that they mean something different by real. And the example I might bring up here is, not a one-to-one, but like for unicorns, for instance, where a lot of people might just be like, yes, clearly we can say unicorns are not real, right? But then someone else might be like, well, right, but the concept is real. So the difference between something that exists as more than a concept and something that exists as only a concept is definitely different than the difference between something that exists as a physical object, takes up space-time, is externally accessible by multiple subjects, is a different thing than saying, is it a real experience that is firsthand and only accessible to the subject that's having it, non-transferable, right? So I think like that's where I would encourage specificity on our terms, is like, don't just say, oh, I think it's real, or I think it's not real. Tell us what you mean by real,
Well, I'm very sympathetic to most of what you just said. Instead of real, I tend to use the term exist, right? Because real is a little bit too, I agree with you, it's not as specific. When we use exist, I think of the etymology of existence, and then I think of like the scientific mind-independent notion of existence, where, Kant would have said the noumena. So there's the noumena and there's the phenomena, and they both exist. So instead of, is it real, I say, does it exist? And things exist under this category. You said, what do we mean by a thing? I think that there are physical objects, mental objects, and sensory objects, right? Things that can be differentiated from one another. And that, to me, exhausts the category of things. If it's a thing, it's a mental object, a physical object, or a sensory object. But I believe that God is the only mind-independent being. By being, I just mean isness, right? And all the things are mind-dependent, including physical objects, mental objects, and sensory objects.
Okay, so you have a form of theism there, and is it a kind of specific theism, or is it a more general?
I'm a Christian theist.
Oh, okay. Cool. Well, I appreciate you breaking down, how you see those terms and what you mean by them. Yeah.
And I think you're totally right, though, that we get lost in obscurity because no one's defining the terms. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, not that long ago, Scott and I had a conversation, I think, brought on by someone else's comments or some other thing we were commenting on about the difference between saying something was real and something existed, right? Like somebody might say that something was real, but it doesn't exist. And mm-hmm. I think maybe that's where someone might say, well, unicorns are real conceptually, but they don't exist. And so, but in that case, you are kind of saying things that exist are the things that are, in that physical category that you can, the physical objects, whereas the mental objects you're kind of excluding from existing, where I guess I think unicorn qualifies as a mental object, right?
That's right. It would be an idea. It would be a thought. Yeah.
So you would tend to say that unicorns do exist conceptually.
That's right. And they do not exist fundamentally or mind independently.
Yeah. So you use that term exists kind of across the board when it comes to things and objects, which it also seemed like you kind of equated things and objects.
Yeah, so exist, the etymology is to stand out. Ex meaning out, sist meaning to stand. So my voice, for instance, is standing out. You're ignoring the background noises, hopefully, in order to pay attention. So when my voice stands out, that means that voice exists. Or if my image exists, like if my image is standing out and you're ignoring maybe the background of my office temporarily, then that's what exists, what stands out. So physical objects stand out, mental objects, they all they stand out so that we can utilize them to achieve our biological chores, let's say. But God is not a thing. God is pure being, pure isness, right? And so God would evade the categories of mental object, sensory object, and physical object.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting way to think about existence. I hadn't thought about, tying it to its etymological foundations there. What I tend to think of with objects is that kind of subject-object relationship, where subjects are the things having the experience, and objects are what we experience.
I would agree. I would agree
physical
with
objects, mental objects. And I forget now what you said. You gave another kind of thing. Did you say perceivable or sensory?
Sensory, yeah.
Oh, okay. What's that like?
A sensory object is like something that you can feel. Something that you
So
can.
there's some overlap there, right? Between physical objects and sensory objects, because some physical objects you can feel. We can sense. A lot of what I consider to be our senses are used to sense physical objects.
Well, I think we have converging lines of evidence for certain things, right? Those converging lines of evidence is where the sensory, right? So I can use multiple senses to establish the existence of this pen. I can not only feel the pen, I can see the pen, I can hear the pen, right? So that's converging lines of evidence, which establishes plausibility for the pen, right? So if I want plausibility, I'm going to use a converging, I'm going to have lots of different senses applied to the same object. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm evading what you just said about, convergence, but did I miss the mark there?
Oh, no. Well, it did strike me as kind of a new idea. I appreciate it. I also agree that we want to be able to confirm something with our multiple senses, right? I think they even kind of sometimes distinguish when people have hallucinations. A lot of them are single sensory hallucinations, and then the ones that are multi sensory tend to be a lot more rare, I think. And so that's why we tend to think the more, if you can hear and see and touch something and reach out and touch it, you're more likely to be like, okay, that must be real.
Right.
But actually, yeah, my question was about the categories that you had laid out of physical things, mental things, and sensory things. And I was saying, if sensory things are things we use our senses, we kind of have that sensory experience of, then isn't that mostly physical objects that we are sensing?
Well, when you say that it's a physical object, are you talking about it in terms of quantities? Because we were talking about qualia and qualities earlier. And when I think of what makes something physical, I think of it in terms of quantities, like mass, charge, momentum, vibration, amplitude. Or frequency.
Okay. Well, these are things that can be measured about physical objects, right?
That's right. Yeah, and I think we define physical in terms of its measurability typically. Or am I off?
Oh, okay. So you're saying you're distinguishing between the object that you sense, that you see or touch or hear or smell, and the thing that would be like measured and described in terms
Right.
of those.
Right.
You don't think that's one and the same? Like if you look and you see something and then you start taking measurements of it, do you think you've created a new object or discovered a different object than the one you were sensing? I've always just thought
Absolutely.
that they're one and the same.
No, I wouldn't say so at all. I think that qualia precedes quality precedes quantity, right? Qualia is nature's given. When we're born, we're just absorbing all of this qualia, and our eyes are wide open and our ears are wide open, and we smell things, and we're kind of developing a landscape of salience, right? Whereas quantifying the qualities of experience is an adaptive move. We do that in order to predict the future, in order to create technologies, and it's a beautiful thing that we do that, right? But it's unnecessary. Not only is it unnecessary, there's lots of clues that the universe isn't fundamentally quantitative. One instance is the fact that you can infinitely divide any quantity. So if I wanted to measure this pen, and I like cut it in half in terms of its measurement, and then half that again, and half that again, and half that, I could do that eternally. And yet there is not an actually infinite distance between the back of the pen and the front of the pen. It's only potentially infinite, which means that my mind is involved. Like my mind can perpetually, cut the distances in half. And so it really shows that mathematics doesn't have a one-to-one correspondence to reality. It's just very useful for us. But the usefulness of mathematics breaks down at a certain level because the universe is not fundamentally quantitative.
Okay. So the physical that you're talking about is in fact another kind of conceptual thing that we create as we interact with the things that we sense.
I think so.
Okay. I think I understand now why you have those categorized differently. It's just interesting. It hits me very differently to hear someone do mental, physical, mental, and sensory, and then it turns out that the physical is actually another part of the mental. It sounds like.
No,
is that fair to say then that it's a subcategory of mental objects because we kind of create it when we take those measurements.
I'm slightly different than the idealist who would assume that mind is fundamental. I don't believe mind is fundamental. I think consciousness is fundamental, and there's a subtle difference. Mind is correlated with brain states. So, the whiteness of this object, right? It is not subjective because I cannot change it to black just by thinking about it. But nor is the whiteness objective because the whiteness relies on my eyes getting the information from the photons. The whiteness is transjective, which means it transcends the subject-object distinction, right? It requires both my eye and the object in an interplay to give me the phenomena of the white object, right? And so I don't believe that mind is fundamental. Mind is just another category of thing, right? And so you hear people in Eastern tradition saying the self is an illusion, right? But the mind is a tool for perpetuating that illusion, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hey guys, actually, that's my time. I appreciate digging into like the meaning, not just saying how you see things, but specifying what you mean. I encourage y'all to keep doing that as you have this conversation. It gets complicated, but hey, I gotta run today.
Salute. Hey,
y'all enjoy.
Hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
Thanks,
good to
Joe.
talk to y'all.
Next time. Yeah. Good conversation. If anybody else wants to jump in, and if you think that qualia does not exist, please call in. Give us your best reasons for that.
I wonder what that would mean. Like, what is it? What would it mean for qualia not to exist? Because I very rarely kind of have qualia conversations. That's typically not how I begin conversations, but I wonder what's meant by qualia when he says qualia doesn't. What does he mean?
Yeah, so like so usually I will debate whether consciousness is fundamental or whether matter versus matter and energy versus consciousness, what's more fundamental. Emergence is emergence, magical thinking, things like that. So I'm trying to come up with a topic, and it came up that I think Matt Dillahunty, because see, here's the thing. I do a lot of steelman arguments in debates.
That's good.
Like I was arguing for God, for the existence, even though I'm not necessarily a theist. I was on the Uncarved Block. Hey, Logan, if you're out there, shout out to you. He's got a channel called the Uncarved Block, and he's an atheist, and he wanted to debate whether God was real or does God exist. And so I took him up on the challenge, and I debated God. And so I do a lot of those sort of things. And one of the things that I did is I debated with Matt Dillahunty as a Christian. So I argued for Christianity with Matt Dillahunty.
Oh, there you go.
And one of my arguments had to do with consciousness, the argument from consciousness. And Qualia came up. And then Matt Dillahunty told me that Qualia was nonsense. And, it was just philosophically confused. And he appealed to Daniel Dennett, who said that the reason Qualia is a philosophical confusion is because it relies on introspection, and introspection is unreliable. But my question to Matt was, how do you know introspection is unreliable outside of introspection? Right. And so basically he
salute to you, man. Shout out to you. That was a great So
he basically called me a jackass, hung up on me as usual.
Of course. I think you're not truly a philosopher until you've been hung up on by Matt Dillahunty. That's the gateway to entry.
Exactly. So anyways, I posted that video because I couldn't come on as an honest steel man. They didn't want to do that. So I had to call back and act like somebody else. It was a little disingenuous. I understand. So I kind of put on my best Southern Baptist preacher voice, like, "Hi, my name is John from Florida." I was like a Bible thumper guy. And so it was kind of fun. It was like a troll in a way, but it actually got into the serious argument of it. And anyways, I posted it up on the group that I'm part of on Facebook. And so it spawned into this whole thing about, well, maybe Matt Dillahunty was correct, Scott. Maybe you're missing it, or maybe you're not understanding the nuance of his argument. And so I'm like, okay, well, we can debate about it. So that's what prompted today's topic. And but actually it goes into, like you say, other things like identity theory with the brain and consciousness. Of course, this. Consciousness is always defined as things other than what it is. With identity theorists, and it's like, so my whole thing is when I say something's fundamental, and we can debate that too, guys. If you want to call in and debate that, I'm more than happy. If quality is a little narrow, that's fine. But the way that I understand what we mean by fundamental properties is that it can't really be reduced to other things. So like you had mentioned, mass, spin, charge, space-time, quantum fields, these things are described in physics as fundamental properties. So as an analogy, consciousness actually fits that definition. It's not reducible, and it just is what it is. It's like, for me, emergence is magical thinking. But a lot of people may say, well, whenever you say consciousness is fundamental, aren't you just sort of using magical thinking there. It's kind of like you're just a gap filler type of thing. What are your thoughts on that? Because I don't think so, but what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that appearances happening in the field of consciousness is something all of us already realize. Whenever we go to sleep and have a dream, you can create the illusion of space-time whenever you want to, whether it's in your imagination or in your dreaming state. So, I mean, that's relatively non-controversial. We have all kinds of dissociative states that our brain gets into, whether daydreaming is a dissociative state, compartmentalizing after an argument is a dissociative state, dreaming, and then it goes all the way up to dissociative identity disorder, where you have multiple personalities, right? So yeah, in cognitive science, we've known about dissociative states for a long time. It's completely uncontroversial that mind or consciousness can create the illusion of things of distinction. The question is, how can a non-conscious being, or several non-conscious beings in the case of physicalism, create consciousness? I mean, and that's magical thinking according to Sam Harris, who should have every predisposition to the contrary. Sam Harris doesn't want to say that what's fundamental is a conscious being, but I think he's honest enough to bite the bullet and say, yeah, I mean, like you brought up Daniel Dennett. Daniel Dennett did not understand the hard problem of consciousness. He just didn't get it. He didn't get it. And he was at least willing to admit that David Chalmers told him he didn't get it. David Chalmers came up with the hard problem and would say, Dan, you do not understand it. Sam Harris did, and Sam Harris had a conversation with Chalmers. But for those of us who take the hard problem seriously, and I think that you should, it doesn't get out of the starting gate, physicalism.
Right. So it's like a trade-off, it's sort of like, well, first of all, I think it's good to note that when it comes to worldviews, they always rest on some sort of assumption. There's always at least one assumption with a model. And you can't explain your assumption in terms of the assumption itself. But that's the whole point of an axiom, is that, we're defining a framework, and, we compare frameworks. So we try to see which framework seems to have the most explanatory power, which one is more parsimonious. And you can do that comparison, like we can admit that they're all sort of assumed, but that's not a big deal, because a lot of material, like I remember listening to the debate I was telling you about between Forrest Valkyrie and Logan, is he was saying, well, you're just assuming consciousness is the beginning. It's like, I think you said, yeah, but you're just assuming matter. Like, it's all an assumption, but the difference is my assumption leads to less hard problems than yours when it comes to philosophy of mind.
And look, more than that, when someone says I'm assuming consciousness, it's like, consciousness is the only thing that anybody knows exists. It's like, because the thing is, you can agree to play their game if you want, and sometimes it's fun to play their game. It's like, you know what, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's see where this goes. But it's like, look, if we don't want to play the game anymore, we can just say, like, look, we don't know that anything exists. We don't know that we're not dreaming right now. But even if we are dreaming right now, awareness exists, right? You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, yeah, like so sometimes I'm like, I'm down to play the game, and then sometimes like, hey, like let's tap back in with the tools we have in our tool bag. As a skeptic, I think any true skeptic should say, hey, you know what I'm saying? I'm very hesitant to believe in anything that I can't sink my teeth into, right? I really want to have it experientially. And that's the reason I agree with like phenomenology. I'm like, okay, like the skeptic can't run from awareness, right? Unless they're a zombie,
Well, that was the other critique I had for that whole Daniel Dennett book, Qualia, is he coined a term called heterophenomenology, which basically pointed to all beliefs are sort of what was the thing? Let me look it up here. Damn it. Hold on. Because I want to word it exactly the way he mentioned it without chopping it up. Phenomenology. He in his book Climbing for Consciousness, he defined it is it basically treats people's reports about their experience as data to interpret, not as automatically accurate descriptions of inner reality. And I guess the reason he proposed that was traditional philosophy of mind often assumes that introspection gives a direct, reliable knowledge of our inner experience, qualia. So he disagreed, and he argued that people can be mistaken about their own mental processes. So scientists shouldn't treat introspective reports as infallible truths. Instead, they should treat them like observations made by a subject. So someone could say they believe in one thing, but their behavior might go against that,
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like the subject reports experiencing his belief in God, but actually he doesn't. It's just the way he talks, and there's reasons for why he says the things he says that are behind the words that he's not even aware of. But here, and Matt Dillahunty had mentioned that as well, that was another problem with qualia and stuff like that. But I'm like, well, if that's true, Matt, how do you know you're a real atheist?
Yeah, it's like, like atheists would really, this is one of the reasons that I appreciate Alex O'Connor so much. Because Alex O'Connor is like embarrassed for those kinds of atheists. It's like,
yeah,
bro, it's like you're running so fast and so hard that you don't see that everyone is around you gasping. Like, bro, why are you willing to give up something like qualia just in order to stick your fingers deeper into your ears? And the thing is, something that I respect about apologists such as William Lane Craig, for instance, is that he'll say, look, if I can make you deny qualia, the argument is over. Like, if I back you into the type of corner where you're saying, I don't exist and, qualia is not real. If you're that desperate to put your hands over your ears, it's like, look, that's the end of the debate. Like at some point, the ref jumps in and stops the fight and just says, hey, we can go no further. And so I think that once someone is in that position, it's just like, yeah, let's throw the towel in. Stick a fork in him.
That's why my alter ego John was asking him, well, for you to deny that sort of like is self-refuting, and he was like saying, well, no, because in science, the only thing that has meaning, the only thing that means anything is what we can verify. I mean, it's the verification principle in science. If you can't verify it, then in science, it has absolutely no meaning. There's no reason to even consider it or talk about it. And qualia falls into that whole thing. But I'm like, yeah, but you do know that philosophers came along almost 80 years ago and debunked the verification principle. Because how do you verify the verification principle?
There you go.
And that it doesn't mean anything. Like, come on, man. His philosophy is so horrible. Like, I don't get it, man. Like,
right.
I just don't get it. And Alex O'Connor does, I agree with you. He does a really good job in talking about this stuff because he's an atheist, but he's someone who says, yeah, but theism has probably better arguments than people really want to acknowledge. Like, he's open to that. He's like, it's not like it's an open shut case like they make it. Like,
right.
We've been debating this shit for thousands of years and it hasn't been resolved yet.
And listen, I really need to take part in more debates because I'm starting to slide into theism being trivially true. And I don't necessarily want to go there prematurely because, you know, a lot of atheists, and like Matt Dillahunty, for instance, he doesn't just want atheism to be true. He wants it to be trivially true. He wants you to feel silly for not, but he's like, obviously, clearly, you must be out of your mind, right? And I find that the more that I just kind of, especially, you know, when you embrace phenomenology, it becomes theism is so trivially true that I look at it and it's like, are you sure you're really thinking about this deeply, or have you just not given yourself intellectual permission to you know, to access certain claims deeply? And I don't know.
Well, yeah, look, you make a typical point that we've heard, an arguing point, and I'm referring to what is that, Zentries 3886. Call into the show, man. Also, you too, Empathy, Respect, my man Isaiah, big supporter of the channel. He's a Christian. Please call in. I'm gonna put the link back down. Hold on, make sure I have the right one. The backstage link, because we need some challengers here, man. We want to do more debates, as Mr. Bistic Speaks says. We want to go ahead and get challengers. We don't need people to agree with us. We want people that can actually challenge the position.
And listen, and listen, we are going to abide. This is this will be the opposite of a Matt Dillahunty experience. This is not. We're going to abide by H.P. Grice's cooperative principle, right?
Yes.
We're going to salute the maxim of quantity, meaning we're going to give you ample time to speak. We're going to salute the maxim of quality, meaning we're going to assume that you're being honest until we have reason to believe otherwise. We're going to salute the maxim of relevance and assume that what you're saying is relevant to the topic, even though you may veer off course a little bit. We're going to salute the maxim of manner. We're not going to be super esoteric and making up our own words and, you know, having private definitions of things. And by abiding by all of those maxims, the conversation is going to be cooperative. We're going to assume that all of us are after truth, even though we disagree, right? And so it's not going to be this combative thing where, you know, like Matt Dillahunty, where he's, you know, sticking his fingers in his ears and trying not to listen.
What is that principle called again?
The cooperative principles is founded by H.P. Grice. That's how to be cooperative in a conversation. You can achieve so much more by abiding by those maxims in your conversation.
Cool. Yeah, I like that a lot, because that's, yeah, as you know, that's what this channel is all about. I like to have really good conversations. I don't like dumpster fires. You know, that stuff is getting old. You know, I like to keep it entertaining. You know, YouTube is entertainment. Let's we can at least say that, but I also want to make it edifying for people. And yeah, so please call in. We're not going to kill you. I'm not going to hunt you down. No, come on in, man. We can have that conversation. I enjoyed a lot, and it's a way to really, I think, exercise your cognitive muscle. You know, to challenge opposing views. And this is why I've gotten to the point where I like to do stillman debates even more so. Like, I like pretending to take the positions of things I don't necessarily, because that kind of helps me understand the other position better.
Gotcha.
Like, sometimes I argue with people as a physicalist, and I make those arguments, and I mean, it's for me, it's not cringy at all. I don't take this stuff too serious like that.
You are an atheist, though, right?
I would say yes, depending on what you mean by God and all that. Like I argued for this weekend, and I almost talked myself into being a theist because I was like, wow, I'm actually giving myself something to think about.
That's
like
dope. See, and the thing is, I hope I always remain in that space where I'm like, oh snap, I was so what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? Not convinced, but persuaded, because persuasion exists on a spectrum. You can go from 48% believer to 49% believer just because somebody you deeply respect says something, right? So persuasion, like I want to be persuaded. And then if I'm persuaded enough, maybe I'll be convinced, maybe I'll be converted, right? But yeah, I don't necessarily look for the quick and easy convert. I want to plant a seed.
Yeah. Empathy respect says, I'm an anti-atheist. It means I don't believe atheists exist.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I think I used to be more in the anti-atheist lane back when I was a Calvinist. You know,
Yeah.
I think a lot of the Calvinists, they're just like, because some of the scriptures say that, you know, mankind has no excuse. You suppressed the truth in your unrighteousness, but you really realized the truth. And so the idea that, you know, God as the greatest conceivable being cannot be deeply denied. He can only be, you know, denied in a shallow sense, meaning like with your words. Or that people say, you know, saying you don't believe in God is like saying you don't believe in oxygen while using that oxygen to say that. You know? So I can understand what that person means.
Well, he says that was a joke, fool.
No, but I seriously believe that. I mean, I don't believe it. I don't believe it now.
Yeah.
I don't believe it now, but yeah.
Right. But
there's a lot
I
of people who do.
Yeah, I understand that too. Look, there's something I've come to realize, even just internally about myself. I talk about intellectual beliefs versus embodied beliefs. So like, I'm not convinced free will exists. Like, I'm just not convinced. I'm kind of agnostic, but I lean towards free will probably being a kind of illusion in a way. But on the other hand, do I really believe that? Because if so, then why do I look both ways when I cross the street? Why do I make decisions every day? Why do I even have this channel to talk about anything if I didn't believe free will exists? Like, it's not coherent, right? So I oftentimes ask myself, yeah, but do you really? And when it comes to God, I can say intellectually, I'm kind of not persuaded one way or the other about the idea of God. But can I really say that for real? Because if not, then what is this standard that I'm always striving for? What is this thing that I'm always like? What's the point of, again, morality, having a foundation of self, things like that? Like, all of that stuff could be attributed to some sort of grounding. In that grounding, we can call it God, for example. So it's a real tricky question. It's a real tricky question. And then even when I was arguing on the uncarved block, you know, one of the things I kept emphasizing was that, you know, this thing we call fundamental consciousness, or Brahman in some traditions, as it's called, is looked to as a being, the being. And it's, if you look at what does this fundamental being, you know, whether you call it a field of awareness or a quantum field or a field of all probabilities, well, that fits the definition of all powerful, all knowing, omnipresent. I mean, there's all sorts of descriptors that fit the God, classical God description. So
Right.
can I really say I don't believe in God if I'm always arguing for those things? I mean, it's not coherent, right? It's just that the God is a label, it's a word. And just by getting rid of the word doesn't make the concept go away.
Right. And you know, the thing is, the reason that I call myself a theist is because everyone else does when they hear what I believe. So it's like, you know, it's a label that kind of saves time. You know,
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's like when people say, oh, what do you believe? It's like, what's fundamental is a conscious being that's all powerful and the creator of the universe, and, you know, omnipotent, you know, omniscient, omnibenevolent, all the other omnis. And they say, yeah, that's God.
Now, I have another person who's part of my community here. His name is Cafe, and he's a perennialist. And so he studies a lot about different ideas of God and the mystical experience and the religious experience and how to tie all that together, kind of like in this sort of pantheistic, sort of idealistic, sort of God narrative, I guess. And he makes a lot of good points about that, that it's just like with, you know, the NDEs or the mystical experiences, there are core commonalities. It's described like the Grayson scale in NDE research. Like there's hallucinations which are different from the Grayson scale. Now, the Grayson scale are those commonalities that people all experience when they have these mystical experiences, like the feeling of oneness, maybe the bright light, the life reviews in an NDE. These sort of things are not hallucinations, because hallucinations are not structured. They're confusing. They're sort of they don't have any profound lasting impact on one's life, whereas the mystical or NDE experience has all of those things. So in perennialist philosophy, it's kind of a way of saying, you know, what combines it all together is the same, like everybody's worshiping the same God, they just call him by different names. Like Christians call him Jesus, Hindus will call him Brahman, Jews may call him Yahweh or Allah in Islam, on and on and on. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I'm a Christian mystic, and mystics, we are willing to forgive the superficial differences in favor of the fundamental similarities. And I believe, you know, as a Christian mystic, I believe Jesus was from that same vein. There's a passage of scripture where the disciples notice that someone is healing people, and is not among them. You know, so the disciples come running back to Jesus and say, "Hey, there's a man that's healing in your name, but he's not among us. What should we do?" And Jesus said, "Leave him alone, because those who are not against us are for us." Right? And so kind of Jesus had this attitude that if other people are participating in this way of being, then the superficial differences can be forgiven. I think that kind of same attitude was used. The same attitude was used in the early church. It said their number was like 5,000 in the book of Acts. It's like when there was 5,000 Christians, they forgave the little mini skirmishes about, you know, what the beliefs were and what the backgrounds were and all of those things. And, you know, now we're kind of so privileged that we kind of argue about things.
Now, let me ask you this kind of on a personal level. Do you go to or a member of a particular denomination or church or anything like that?
I go to a Foursquare church, and I have no idea what Foursquare means, but they say, oh, you know, we're a Foursquare church, and it's yeah. So yeah, I go to a church. I think that the ecclesia, or the gathering together, is very important, and so I do that every Monday.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I was thinking about trying to join something around here, but you know, I live in the deep South. I don't know where you live, but I'm here in Florida, and a lot of these folks are evangelical, fundamental type of Christians, and so I've visited them, but it oftentimes is sort of a little too, I don't know, authoritarian maybe, or it doesn't give you room for idealism, because what I've noticed is a lot of the ministers I speak to, they're kind of like physicalists too.
Right. You know, what's interesting is like, if you challenge them on that, they'll usually like leave it alone. Like, you know, I've had someone say, you know, you can't say that you are fundamentally God, right? That's wrong, or that's heresy, you know? And I'll say, you know, what existed prior to the universe? And prior is, you can't use prior, because prior sets a priority in time before the existence of space-time. So you say, what existed sans universe, or without the universe? The answer is God, right? According to the Christian tradition, God existed without the universe. And so then the question is, well, then what did God use to make the universe? What were the ingredients? What did God use? If only he existed, then God used himself to create the universe. And there's tons of hints in there, like the fact that Adam is essentially God breath wrapped in dirt. You know what I mean? So that we are fundamentally God. And then, Jesus, the second Adam, had that grand realization: I and the Father are one. He who has seen the Father has also seen me. And even the Apostle Paul recognized it for a second. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who thought it not robbery to make himself equal with God, but humbled himself as a servant, and so on. But I do got to get out of here. My wife is hitting me up. She must be out of bed now.
Okay, I got you.
But
No
bro,
problem, man.
let's legit set up some more debate, some more conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before you leave, I do this like usually Saturdays at 12 in the afternoon for, topics. And then Sundays I do the debates. So I'm trying to ramp up this debate thing. I'm going to start doing it this time, like 10 a.m. on Sundays. So we can set something up. Maybe Saturday we can come up with a topic. Maybe we can work on it together. If you're free, just you got my email, so just let me know and we can kind of work that out.
For sure. And maybe on Saturday it would be fun to get into the Jay Garfield Bernardo debate and just kind of pause it throughout, and maybe we'll do that in sections. We'll do maybe a series, with a couple Saturdays. We'll kind of get that knocked out.
Perfect. Okay, that sounds great, man. Let's do it, Mr. Biscuit Speaks, and we'll link up then, man. Well, you go take care of the wife, and I'll keep the show going.
For sure, family. Salute.
Yep. All right, brother. Yeah, cool, man. Can I join? So, of course. He says, I want to join like over a quarter an hour. Just join in whenever you want, man. I've got the link here. And if you're not, if I don't have any challengers right now, and we can challenge other things, not just qualia. If you want to challenge idealism, maybe you think that's a nonsensical sort of philosophy or metaphysic, you can call in right now and we can debate that. Or if we don't have any challenges and you just want to call in and discuss stuff, do so. Cafe, you're more than welcome. Call in. We can discuss perennialism. Isaiah, if you want to call in, we can discuss Christianity and the cult of atheism. Anything you want to talk about? I mean, I'm kind of open. I mean, I know that are qualia real or a philosophical illusion? Maybe that's not your bag or whatever. But whatever, man, call in. I'm here. Got a little time. I'm going to try to end the stream maybe in about an hour. I can go on for an hour. But yeah, man, I think it's kind of debated, especially among a lot of the new atheists. They'll have a common objection to qualia, like what people call qualia are simply neural processes in your brain. And the way I kind of respond is that a brain description only explains, structure and functions. It doesn't really explain the experience itself. For example, like scientists could describe like neural activity, wavelength of light, firing patterns in visual cortex. But those descriptions, they never really capture, for example, what blueness is really like, or redness, or the taste of chocolate, whatever. There is an explanatory gap between physical descriptions and subjective experience. And this gap is exactly what David Chalmers points to in The Hard Problem of Consciousness. And so, like I say, another objection is that they'll say that you cannot trust introspection because people can misrepresent their own mental states. And that's fine, because while introspection may be imperfect, the existence of experience itself is indubitable. So you might misidentify the cause of a feeling, but you cannot be mistaken that you're having an experience at all, right? Like doubting experience requires having the experience of doubt. And doubt feels different than not doubt. So that's qualia. So the existence of conscious experience is the most certain thing than any theory about the brain, I would say. Maybe someone would say, well, qualia are ineffable and therefore meaningless. Many real things are kind of difficult to describe, but still exist. For example, like pain, emotions, aesthetic experiences. Just because something is subjective does not mean it is illusory. Qualia simply refers to the first person dimension of reality, right? Maybe you look at it like qualia is just sort of a philosophical invention created by philosophers or something like that. I don't know. The concept is simply a label for something everyone already experiences. So before philosophers used the word qualia, people still experience colors, tastes, sounds, pain, all that shit, right? The term is not inventing the phenomenon, it's just describing it. That's what I'm saying. So I would say that conscious experience is really hard to deny. It's sort of undeniable. Conscious experience has qualitative character, like what it feels like. And these qualitative features are what we call qualia. Therefore, qualia exists. So to deny it is essentially to sort of deny the reality of experience. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I guess maybe the real question might not really be whether qualia exists, because every conscious being encounters them constantly, right? The deeper question may be, what are qualia and how do they arise in reality? Are they produced by the brain? Are they fundamental features of consciousness? Or do they point towards a deeper theory of mind altogether? If you have any thoughts, let's explore it, man. I've got the link right here. We can talk about it. And do you think subjective experiences are influenced by a global workspace? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the brain is that constraint. The brain is the constraint of how you experience what you experience. If you destroy the brain, like if you cut my head off, I won't be conscious anymore, right? If I drink, like I'm drinking this coffee, and that chemical, the caffeine, it makes me more sharp. It makes me talk too much. It gives me energy, like this little burst of energy or whatever. All that's really real. All that's very real. But that is something that is sort of underdetermined. It doesn't prove materialism. It doesn't prove idealism, because that fact of the matter is correlation. And idealism and materialism don't deny the correlation between mental states and qualia, right? It's just that what we call physical is within consciousness, right? It's not something we don't know conscious experience outside of a conscious experience. So you don't suppose you're looking into a screen on TV, like suppose you're looking at a movie and you have this screen, and that's analogous for the screen of perception. And within the movie, it says, hey, in this movie is a brain, and that brain explains the screen for which you're looking at the movie by. That's circular. It doesn't work, right? You can't look at the contents of consciousness in order to explain consciousness itself. That doesn't logically work, right? So that's what I mean. But that thing that we're looking at does sort of shape our experience, So it's a good question, and it's a common question, Cafe, the term is only applied when one returns to the baseline of consciousness and the ego returns to recognize it as such. Yeah. Yeah, man. It's, make no mistake, it's all an axiom. All of these things are axioms. We don't have complete certainty. And so idealism isn't pointing out that physicalism sucks because it's an uncertain, it's unreliable, or it's not complete. That's not really the point. The point is, how do you get experience from non-experience? Like if by definition physical things are not qualitative, in other words, physical things are not conscious, they don't do the things consciousness does. They don't have like this internal experience inside each atom or whatever. Like tables aren't conscious and stuff. Like if we're looking at physical objects as inert, dead matter, then how does experience arise from that? And some people say, well, if you just combine enough of that unconscious matter together in just the right way, then experience will arise. The first person subjective experience will arise out of it somehow. But there's no explanation, and it's a category error. There's a gap. So it doesn't really work. It's just a theory, but it's a theory that has developed into what we call the hard problem of consciousness. And so because we can't solve that problem, at least we haven't solved the problem up to now, then, why should we believe it? I don't, as a skeptic. So idealism isn't adding anything. It isn't like a faith-based belief. It's actually born out of skepticism. It's like I build my epistemology not on what I want to believe or based on what others believe or politics or culture. I try to build my epistemology on first principles, like things we know to be the case. But really, what do we know? Well, we know that we're conscious because all knowing presupposes it, right? So that's the first thing. There's consciousness, there's this experience, there's this screen of perception. And from there, I build into logic. I can't experience and not experience at the same time. That'd be a contradiction, right? And so I infer that logic works and that it's a good tool. And so from there, it leads me to my position. Until you can show me how it doesn't follow. If you can show me a contradiction somewhere or a gap or something like that, I'm more than willing to check it out. Skepticism is not accepting some other conclusion because of problems in another conclusion. Quite the Quincy. Well, I can conclude that one model has less problems than another, right? And that's really all I'm saying. I'm saying that one model seems to have less conceptual problems than another. Like if we're trying to explain consciousness in terms of non-conscious things, then we've got a gap problem. And so to be skeptical, you would have to recognize that and admit that. So, yeah, ultimately, all inference is not. I'm a fallibilist, so I understand that I can be wrong about what I infer. You know, maybe logic itself is just what human beings do, like reason and rationality. But as long as we're playing that game, then we can use those rules of logic to test and to compare and to figure out what seems to be the most logical conclusion, right? But ultimately, yeah, I'm agnostic on most things. Most things I'm agnostic on. Just because I argue for idealism over materialism doesn't mean that I think idealism, I know that to be the case, because you have to be, genuine. And that's why, a lot of people nowadays, they'll say, well, I noticed that there's been a shift. I think because of the hard problem of consciousness, a lot of people say, well, I'm not really a materialist. I'm not really a physicalist. They'll say that, but then they'll argue for physical or use physicalist arguing points that really fail. I've noticed that. I've noticed a lot of that. I think it's because they're not physicalists. Beyond me to tell someone how they identify. But I would say that it seems like they lean towards physicalism, because it seems like they don't want to see idealism as a valid thing, because it's so foreign. It's a foreign concept, because our culture and our language. That's just my opinion. But again, I'm going to put the link down because the live chat is really popping right now, and I don't want it to get buried too much. So I've got the link. If you want to call in and challenge, do so. If you don't want to challenge and you just want to just have a conversation, call in. Nell, hello. How are you doing? Nice to see you. You can always call in as well, Nell. If you don't want to challenge, that's fine. I've got a little more time left. I got about 45 minutes to continue the stream, so I'm open for it. I'm here for it. Oftentimes it's sort of the same thing. It's a conceptual gap that we're talking about. I just don't see how to fill that gap. And a lot of people will say, well, because of maybe a misunderstanding, they'll say, well, you're so fast to point out that you can't get consciousness from unconsciousness, but you're telling me you can get unconsciousness from consciousness. You can get matter from consciousness. Why doesn't it go both ways? But that's really not the claim. That's really an internal critique on materialism. Materialism are the ones that define the physical as primary. Right. And so for me, there isn't a cause, just everything is in consciousness itself. Right. I think idealism is an emergent feature of the physical, applying a logical order of occurrence. One precedes the other, but that doesn't take away from the functionality of idealism. I can understand that. But again, it seems to me that if we say the contents of consciousness are the things that explain consciousness, there's some kind of problem there. It seems like that doesn't really work, I guess. logically speaking, I don't see how that's going to work. Still, we've got the category error, the conceptual gap going on there, idealism as an emergent feature of the physical. I don't know how that works. You can call in and explain. Like, why would you argue that way? I don't know. I understand it's a common argument. You know, it's just correlation. Because something's correlation, that doesn't define where the direction is, the causal direction. In fact, when we're talking about metaphysics, causation itself is under question. Who says that causation is really fundamental? You know, even on general relativity, causation is not considered fundamental, right? Even in certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, the same thing. If you have no physicality, how do you have anything to be conscious? Physicality is an appearance in consciousness. So consciousness is fundamental. That's how that would work. So physicality is the label that we give to that appearance in conscious experiences. Like intersubjective fields, for example. Like if you have a field of people and they all see the same thing, that's an intersubjective fact, you might say, right? But it's all an experience of each person. But that experience doesn't generate, you know, the thing that you're experiencing. That's sort of circular. Wish I could debate with you today, but I'm driving. I know, Joel. I know you're scared. I know that's just an excuse you give all the time. No, I'm just kidding. So the tree doesn't have to fall to make the sound of a tree falling? Sure. That wouldn't be my argument. Like, I would say that there is an objective reality out there. You know, there could be a teapot floating around Jupiter, but you know, I have no reason to believe that there is. You know, you'd have to make a case that there is. But as far as the tree falling analogy, I've heard this a lot. No, I think that objective reality exists, but it all exists within the greater subjective fundamental consciousness, right? That's what it is. So hopefully that answers that question. Again, call in. I don't know, is that explain the maybe the implication, because I'm very familiar with that whole thing. Objective reality is just the objective field of energy that everything is created from. What is an objective field of energy? What do you mean by that? Seems like energy is another label we put on an experience or an observation. So, like with the fallen tree question, like if a tree falls in the forest and no one, I guess, is around to hear it, doesn't make a sound or whatever. So that's thought to kind of challenge idealism. I get it, but it doesn't refute anything, because the reason is that the question usually confuses two different meanings of, say, sound. So physical vibrations in the air, like what? Pressure waves moving through the atmosphere. And then there's the auditory experience, like the actual heard sound in consciousness. So experience involves the second. Under idealism, the auditory experience is what we normally mean by sound in our everyday life, right? So no experience means no heard sound. So if no conscious being is present, then there is no hearing. Therefore, there is no auditory experience. So in the experiential sense, no sound really occurs. The tree still falls. There may be vibrational processes, but the experience of sound only exists when perceived, right? Idealism would not really deny regularities in nature. That's the thing. This is not like solipsism. Idealism does not say the world disappears when we're not looking, okay? Instead, it really says that what we call the physical world, consisting of structured patterns of experience, are what they are. So even if no human really hears the tree, animals might hear it. Another observer could potentially hear it. The event fits into a consistent experiential structure that we call nature. Philosophers like, say, George Berkeley argued that the stability of the world really comes from the continuity of perception in consciousness, not from matter existing independently of all experience. So this thought experience sort of assumes physical realism. You know what I mean? Like the falling tree question sort of assumes from the start that there is a purely physical world producing sounds independent of an experience. But that assumption is exactly what idealism is questioning, though. So the argument kind of becomes circular. Like, it assumes materialism, then claims idealism fails because materialism is true. That doesn't really work, Let's see. Sounds backwards to me. I see the objective to be the primary and the conceptual to be built from it. Well, yeah. Like when we say the conceptual, what do you mean? I also agree that, we have disassociated minds, like when we talk about conceptual things, those are done within conscious experiences of individuals. But what idealism is saying is that those disassociations also exist within a greater consciousness field. That's what idealism is saying. So it's not denying that there's localized conscious experiences that may be wrong or right, or concepts rather. Reread the tree analogy I made. It was not the old doesn't make a sound. I don't understand. So objective reality is pure energy. This energy is the building blocks of all things, and the subjective reality is self, and the subjective reality is self-aware manipulation of this energy through self-aware, intelligent complement. What is pure energy? Matter? So you're saying matter is fundamental, right? And it's where experience arises from. So the question is, how does experience arise or emerge from that energy? That's the question on the table. How does qualia come out of pure energy? And what do you mean by pure energy? That sounds kind of woo-woo. I'm digging the background music. Yeah, it sounds like people thinking. It sounds like sounds like one of those game shows where you have to think and come up with an answer. Okay, we'll reiterate. Can you hear the tree fall if it doesn't in fact fall? No. Nope. It's got to fall before you can hear it, Forrest. Unless you're delusional. I usually don't hear things unless they actually cause air pressure. Right? At least that's how it appears within my experience. It's a consistent pattern and regularity. And all those patterns and regularities and structures are appearances within my consciousness. I don't think it's possible. Oh, something else. Yeah, so it's really hard to it's kind of hard for a lot of people not to assume materialism in their arguments, because a lot of folks don't even realize that's what they're doing. They're begging the question because we're so used to the physicalist story. That's what makes idealism not so intuitive. But we know that intuition can oftentimes be wrong. Our intuitions about how reality works is oftentimes based in our culture and language, right? But it doesn't make it true. And so that's what philosophy does. Philosophy questions all those assumptions. That's the idea. And we have Miss Nell. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Cool. Glad to see you. Thanks for jumping on in. I was starting to feel lonely. It almost feels like I'm talking to myself sometimes.
That's what your hand is for.
Yeah. That's why God made hands. Or crack. That's why God made crack. Yeah. But how are you doing today?
Oh, got some fuel in me, so I'm feeling talkative.
Cool. Did you have any questions or comments?
Let's see. You mentioned earlier that you've noticed people who say they're not materialists, but they sound like materialists. And what caught my attention with that is that I feel like that's a lot of how you and I went through deconstructing of our, a religion, our faith, because it's like, even though we'll say, oh, I've come to the conclusion that I no longer believe in God, that doesn't magically get rid of decades of religious thinking and brainwashing, indoctrination.
Right. Exactly. And because you kind of bring that baggage into your atheism. It's kind of like how some people, they may have came from a Christian point of view, Christian religion. And so when they deconstructed and then they argue against God, what they have in mind is how they used to think about God. And so maybe they're a little bit rusty on their Hinduism or something.
Well, and I would say even I, stumble with this because it's like I try to remain a true agnostic of like, all right, both idealism and materialism aren't convincing to me. And yet I'll sometimes catch myself still using a materialistic framework when, trying to tackle the issue. It's not easy.
Right. Is my volume, I just turned my volume up. I wanted to make sure that fixed the issue. Can you hear me a little better? Jojo Freelancer, let me know. But yeah, man. Yeah, it's so easy to bring in baggage. And that's what I think happens with a lot of people who critique idealism. You've got external critiques and then you've got internal critiques.
Yeah.
And if you're doing an external critique, then it's going to play out a little different than an internal one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and I'd say it's most of the time it is on a subconscious level. You don't even realize that you're doing it. So it's like, I don't, when we do come across people like this, it's like, I try to be like, all right, you were once in their shoes. You need to give them some charitableness, some grace. It's like, and just, try to still have an honest conversation, but, point out that, hey, where you're coming from seems to be like from this, materialistic framework.
Yeah. And it's real helpful to point out, to remind people about certain logical fallacies that get snuck in under the radar because of those sort of assumptions, even though I understand them 100%. But you have to bring those up so that they're aware, because if you don't, they're going to continue on with those fallacious arguments that you have to engage with as though they're really good arguments, and they're really not. It's kind of like people say, like, I was looking at one, like, maybe I'll do this. Let me do this. I'll have to do I'm going to do a little reaction real quick. Well, I don't know if I got time for that, but yeah, why not? But it's sort of like in Mr. Biscuit Speaks, I believe this was him. This was him. So let me just actually now this is who I was speaking about with Alex K. When I don't know if you were here earlier on, but
No.
I had Mr. Biscuit Speaks as a special guest this morning, and he called into The Line, which is an atheist show. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I am familiar with that. I'm trying to remember his name. The
Forrest.
The ex, well, the one who started it, the ex-Mormon.
Oh yeah. I like him too. And also the other one, the ex-Jehovah Witnesses. I can really relate to him because I used to be a Jehovah Witness rather. But here's the call-in show. Now this is a reaction of a reaction of a reaction. This is my man Alex K, and he discovered this video by watching my video when I was reacting to it. So he decided to do his own reaction to that same video. But it kind of highlights the problem I was talking about. And I think there's a particular part that gets to the point of what we were talking about. Let me see. Yeah, the correlation causation. I think it's around this area. So I'm going to go ahead and play it. And let me make sure I shared it. Yeah, I did. So I'll go ahead and let it play.
Yeah, again, the idealist is not saying that consciousness exists absent of matter. Matter is an expression of consciousness. Matter is how consciousness appears when viewed from different perspectives.
By the way, this guy, Alex K, he's going to join me on the show at some point, he said.
Okay.
And so we're going to do some stuff. He's got a really big channel. He's got one called Reality Gone Mental with his co-host, and they really put together a really good show. But anyways, I'll let this play. Just want to give him some props.
All right.
And I think he's just arguing against dualism and doesn't really have a good fundamental understanding of what idealism is even trying to say.
I bring the wall up back. Yeah, for sure. And I think also the biggest fundamental issue we're kind of like running into is like, what does exist truly mean? Like in that, like what do you mean when you say that consciousness exists? Like, what are we kind of positing to be that case? I think many materialists will take that like existence means that something is actually like materially like there, like maybe it's made up of matter or something of the sort. I guess like when we talk about consciousness, I suppose the real question is like, what do you mean when you say that consciousness exists, or like the thoughts, or like maybe like a thought exists or an idea exists in general? I think that's like the biggest issue here. And I think when we kind of just like look at like science and biology, or pretty much any just like structured kind of inquiry, we're always looking at associations to determine like cause and effect. And even in philosophy, we have like the PSR, et cetera, and these ideas that like, such things have effects. And when we look at things being associated with each other multiple times over and over and over again, it comes to some conclusion that one thing causes the other thing, et cetera. So when we look at, I think like what we're trying to say here, of course, is like, what we're trying to say here is that we're seeing associations with the brain and matter produce a conscious experience. Like it seems to be the case that conscious experience is associated with like matter and like the brain, and we don't, and I guess big.
So look, I like the way Zena's approaching this conversation a lot better. I think she's more inquisitive. I think she has a better intuitive understanding of what maybe the caller is trying to communicate. I think that she has a little more good faith, maybe. But that being said, right? Like again, like I think what we observe with neuroscience gives us the neural correlates of consciousness, right? The NCC. And so what we observe is a connection between physical brain state, connection is the wrong word, correlation between physical brain state and certain reported experiences of human being, right? And what that tells us is that certain aspects of a human mind is correlated to certain aspects of physical brains, right? What we call physical brains. But what the caller is pointing at is something deeper. When he says that reality is consciousness, he's not talking about that it's human consciousness. He's not saying that reality is a human brain or should look like a human brain. He's not even saying that consciousness is like separate from matter, right? He's talking about awareness, which is something that is far more basic than like a human mind. A human mind is a complex arrangement of awareness that displays as a human brain. So the human mind, yes, is always going to show up as a complex nervous, as a human brain, right? Human eyesight is always going to show up as eyes and the visual cortex, right? Human metacognitive thinking is always going to show up as whatever the prefrontal cortex or whichever cortex it's supposed to be. So if you remove those features of a human brain, you're removing those features of the human mind because they're not separate things.
So you might ask yourself, why do they make those assumptions? Why do you think these particular, like Forrest and her, why are they asking those questions as if that's what he was saying when he said no such thing? Why do you think that is? And I think it goes back to what you just said. There's so much assumptions going into the position. It's almost like they're arguing against something that they don't really understand. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I would say that that's definitely part of the equation. And I would say another part of the equation, though, is just how underrepresented, I'd say, at least from my own view, idealism seems to be. It's like,
Yeah,
I would say a lot of people would just lump idealism in under with, what's the other one? Panpsychism.
yeah. It's way, yeah. That's it. That's why you can't fault people for it.
And just for everyone's sake, what would you say, like, because you mentioned earlier that that, you know, consciousness permeates, you know, the cosmos, atoms, everything. But, you know, the panpsychist would also be like, well, you know, matter and everything is permeated with consciousness as well. So, like, you know, you brought up the combination problem. You know, how would you say that, you know, idealism escapes that combination problem? How does it differentiate itself from panpsychism?
Oh, yeah, great question. So, idealism is to say that the universe is within consciousness. So it's not that there's a little consciousness in the universe. So if you say it's in the universe, then you have like a panpsychist view, which would be like in every atom is a little consciousness subatomic particle, you know, and then it has the combination problem, and also there is no evidence of a consciousness particle. I don't even know what a consciousness particle would mean, right? Like it's how does a subjective experience come in the form of a particle or an atom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what idealism says is that, well, that doesn't make sense, so scrap that. So consciousness, the way we explain consciousness in reality would be that matter, energy, all the objects are simply expressions of consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that we as, you know, human beings, we're part of that. So, but we truly exist because we are conscious. So we are consciousness within consciousness, which makes better sense than saying we are consciousness within matter.
Okay,
Because
so
there's no consciousness particle there.
if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that the particle is an expression of consciousness. Like the particle is actually there, but it's an expression. It's not the fundamental or the essence of consciousness, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So the brain is like, yeah, like all physical things are expressions of a disassociated conscious experience, you know, like a greater mind. It's kind of like we disassociate every night when we go to sleep and have a dream, right? But those dreams are real. They exist as dreams within the dreamer, you know? So it fits as an analogy in that way. If that makes sense. I don't know if that's clear.
Well, I mean, I say it's always good to, you know, rehash this so you can either get a better understanding or greater understanding of it. So, why would you say then that? So you're saying that, you know, there's this dissociative, you know, fracture of the greater mind at large. So why does it in nature, you know, why does it tend to gravitate towards that instead of remaining a whole?
Yeah, the disassociation part. Well, the reason we would conclude that or assume that should be the case is because we assume that other minds exist. So like if I assume that you're conscious, which I have every valid reason to think you are a conscious person, then that would mean that solipsism isn't true. You know, solipsism would be that, you know, the case that, you know, I am that greater conscious, or I'm the only consciousness that exists in reality. But because I assume other minds are also existing, then that would mean that, well, then within this same mind, there must be some sort of a disassociation. There must be.
Okay. All right. So I feel like you're misunderstanding the question, because no, I mean, that's a great starting point to be like, okay, there's other minds in the universe, so, you know, a dissociation makes sense. But what I'm asking is why the dissociation in the first place? So like, you know, why does it seem to be that, if we look at the early universe and say, we're just for the sake of argument, we're looking at this primordial consciousness, the simple universal mind. So why is it that as time goes on, this consciousness seems to be heading towards more complexity, which seems to lead to more minds? Like what's going on behind the curtain there?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just to describe what we're talking about to the audience. So when we say, why do other minds disassociate? So other minds disassociate in the context of idealism because individual minds are not fundamental. They are localized modulations, right? Of, say, that universal consciousness field or whatever. Disassociation here doesn't mean like a psychological disorder. It's more like a functional partitioning of awareness. So here's kind of the breakdown, I guess. In idealism, there's one underlying field of consciousness, right? All experiences emerge within this field. The field is continuous and it is holistic. Local minds are disassociated. So a human or animal mind is a localized perspective, kind of like a wave or a whirlpool in the ocean, as I always say. So these dissociations sort of allow for dualism, like for separate semi-independent centers of experience. This is where I say there's both dualism and non-dualism. So without this association, like I said, every conscious experience would be fully shared, which we don't observe, as I mentioned, right? So kind of think of it like this. The ocean is consciousness. Waves on the ocean are the individual minds, and waves can interact, but they do remain distinct, right? And this is kind of like a useful concept. So individual, say, agency is that each mind can navigate reality from its own perspective. We know that's true. You have your own perspective from mine. Then there's like a stable intersubjectivity of reality. So separate minds can perceive like this consistent patterns, regularities, objects, and events without fully blending our experiences, which we don't. We know that's the case. Then we have that limitation of our experience, like a fully unified mind experiencing everything at once would just be overwhelming, right? And then even though minds are disassociated, they do share the same underlying field. So consistency of shared reality is a possibility. This explains phenomena like predictable physical laws, the shared objects, the communication and social interactions like what we're having here. So maybe a concise explanation would be that on idealism, other minds are dissociations of universal consciousness as localized centers of awareness, because it's just what nature does. It's sort of like, it leaves a question. That's the hard problem of idealism. Like, why the dissociation? We can tell a story about what it is and what it does and why it does, or how it does and all of these things, but it doesn't tell you why it does it, right?
Oh yeah,
but
we're great storytellers.
Yeah, but and that's the same problem with materialism, by the way. They also struggle with that too. Like, if they would have to also explain that, like, why does this why isn't everything just material? Why is there this other thing called consciousness? And worse yet, how do you get from material, dumb, unthinking matter into localized experiences at all, right? Without some, same property from which it can actually emerge from. Like, it's easier to say, like, a weak emergent position, to say, well, individual consciousness just emerges from other consciousness. That makes sense. Kind of like how some new physical properties can emerge from other physical combinations, right? That's fine, because they're all of the same category.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say even under idealism, weak emergences of more complex conscious beings make sense. You know, if you're with, you know, when you have you have fundamental consciousness underlying it all. You know.
Mm-hmm. Say that question again. I'm sorry.
Well, I'd say even under idealism, weak emergence with when it comes to more complex versions of consciousness makes sense. You know, it's like, you know, because you know we can see that, you know, when it comes to complex, you know, consciousness like a human being, it's like we can obviously see that without the brain, it's like that more complex consciousness wouldn't exist. So it's like once you have consciousness, it's like, to me, it's like, well, all right, well, as times go on and systems become more complex, it's like, you know, you can just weak emergence, you know, makes sense.
Right. Yeah, because strong emergence is what kind of doesn't make sense for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just seems like there's a conceptual category error going on, especially in terms of consciousness. Like, you know, one could say, like, here, let me look at this question, for example. Why is that a better explanation than a single objective reality, right? So, you know, I would kind of say that it's better than a single objective reality because disassociated minds allow experience to be relational and participatory rather than fixed and rigid. Like a single objective reality, completely independent of consciousness, would fail to explain the subjective richness and intersubjective coherence, right, that we actually observe. So reality is experienced, not just out there, right? In idealism, all objects are patterns within consciousness. If there were a single objective reality, we would not have first-person access to it directly. Disassociated minds would allow multiple perspectives to interact with that same reality, which gives rise to the shared consistent experience. The other question or statement, emergence is a property of a physical complexity. This is demonstratable in machinery. The brain is vastly more complex than a machine. Okay, well, the question then is, how does conscious experience come out of complexity? At what point in the complexity does an experience arise? We're just going back to the hard problem of consciousness in that case.
And I mean, I would say that, you know, just looking at materialism on its own, saying, all right, well, you know, consciousness is a product of complexity. I don't think that just saying that is an issue. It's because it's like, you know, and just saying, okay, well, you know, it's a mystery for now. Maybe we can solve it for later. Like, you know, to me, that's all fine. It only becomes an issue when you're trying to find the most parsimonious metaphysical view, and it's like, well, if this other view can be like, well, this problem doesn't even exist, all right, well then, you know, can materialism combat that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, like disassociated minds, they're kind of better than a single objective material reality because they allowed for consciousness, like stable experiences. Like, and I understand that, you know, the promissory note argument is always there, and it's been there for hundreds and hundreds or thousands of years, but we haven't got anything yet. And for me, it's just seems to me plausible that the problem is with our concepts, not necessarily that this is a real problem at all. Like, it just seems like to be a limitation of our concepts. Like, we have to understand what the hidden assumptions going into it. Like, we're assuming that materialism is true, so no wonder we're going to have a hard problem with consciousness, right? So it's kind of like you're letting that limitation hamstring you forever. You know, maybe it's time to sort of look at other alternative explanations, and we can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. We can still keep on investigating. We can still, pursue neural correlates of consciousness to see what's going to happen. But, in the meantime, we can also acknowledge the problems, though. The conceptual problems. Like, what's wrong with that?
No, I mean, I see where you're coming from, Scott, but I also see where, like, the pitfalls of, like, what the materialist is doing, where it's like, because, the materialist is all, there's the argument I see that a lot of times is like, materialism is just interchangeable with naturalism. And a lot of people will try to say, well, idealism isn't relying on naturalism either, which, obviously isn't the case.
Right.
So, but it's like, the issue is that materialism is relying on naturalism, and then it's just saying, all right, well, this naturalism is materialism.
Right.
And so to me, it's like, so obviously when they say, oh, this is a scientific mystery, but we'll eventually solve it later. It's like, I actually don't like blame them for that, because it's like, because under naturalism, obviously that is the case. It's like, usually, we'll come across a scientific mystery, and then, it might take a few years, it might take a decade, it might take centuries, but eventually something usually comes up and it's like, that makes sense. This is the explanation for it. That's usually how things work. But as you're saying, though, it's like, when it comes to consciousness, though, maybe it's quite possible that we won't be able to solve it using the scientific method at all. And
exactly, because the scientific method is all about measuring behavior. It's all about looking at consistent patterns, laws, causal regularities without supernatural arbitrariness, right? But those things are what we experience within consciousness, right? So the observation itself implies the very regularities they're talking about. So to have any conscious experience at all, there must be some stable pattern in which the experiences occur to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if the world were completely just like fucking random, you couldn't reliably perceive objects, remember events, or even act in any sort of effective way or do science at all. So consciousness sort of presupposes a natural order, because awareness depends on patterns that can be tracked and reorganized, right? And, and to say that consciousness isn't natural is to sort of argue for your conscious experience. It's to sort of call yourself a god then.
And I feel like there are people, or materialists who are like, oh yeah, it's not natural, or even naturalists who will try to make the argument that, oh yeah, consciousness is just too mysterious, so it's not natural. It's like, no, I feel like that's a giant mistake to try to put consciousness outside the realm of the cosmos. Exactly.
It is. Yeah, it's like, why do that? Why make that move? That goes back to the virtue of parsimony, to
me, the two explanations that make the most sense is either consciousness is fundamental, or consciousness is emergent property of the physical world. It's like it's it's either one of those two, or if you want to go the dualist route, matter and consciousness co-equally exist as a foundation.
And so like, setting idealism aside, like we look at emergence of consciousness, I'm always willing to say that, I agree with Neil deGrasse Tyson when he says the universe is under no obligation to make sense to us. So what we might think is magical thinking could just be a limitation of our ability to understand shit. Like, you know, something from nothing, you know, people always say, oh, that's absurd or whatever. And it kind of is, depending on your framework. But maybe it is, you know, anything's possible. Like who am I to tell reality how it needs to do reality? You know?
And even I would say, you know, I'd probably describe myself as, you know, a strong atheist. It's like I would never make the absolute certainty claim that no gods exist. It's like, maybe, you know, even though it seems absurd to me, of something that is not only outside of time and space, but also is personal. Like it has these absolute qualities. It's maximally great. It's an agent of itself, and it can also it can act out even though there's no such thing as time yet. It's just like it all just seems absurd to me, but there's maybe an off chance that's true, you know.
Are you familiar with Robert Lawrence Kuhn?
Sounds familiar.
So he's a philosopher and a retired neuroscientist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been struggling with the idea of consciousness since like his you know, days in academia, like when he went to college and stuff like that for his careers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And now that he's retired, he kind of got into consciousness, and he started a TV show, I think way back in the 90s, called Closer to Truth.
Mm-hmm.
And now he continues on YouTube. So he's got his own YouTube channel called Closer to Truth. And he points out something that I think is very useful. Is he says that he goes, I've studied every model of consciousness. Like there's over 300 models of consciousness on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And he's interviewed materialists, different flavors of physicalism to explain consciousness, the idealism, the panpsychism. Like he knows all about all of that shit.
Yeah.
And he says the problem is, he goes, in every single consciousness model, they all have something absurd to say. It always bottoms out to some absurdity or something we could argue is absurd, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says there's no way around it. He goes, that's the problem. That's why we have 300 fucking models of consciousness, because every one points to the other person's absurdity and then ignores their own absurd, you know, thing, right?
Well, another thing Neil deGrasse Tyson said, it's like, if you ever want to figure out what's not settled science, just look how many books are published on it.
You can join right now, Jojo. Let me put the link in.
Like there are thousands of books on consciousness, and that's
yeah. That's right. That means we don't know what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's very true. I mean, you know, now some will make the argument that you know, the courtroom can be full of thousands of people considered guilty of a crime, but there's only one person guilty of that crime. You know, so it doesn't mean that just because there's thousands of people accused that means no one's guilty.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so hit the here he comes, Jojo. Hey Jojo, glad you could join me, man. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Do you hear me? Okay. Sorry, I'm Dutch, so
Dutch.
English is not my first language.
I see. No problem. Where do you reside in Europe?
In Europe?
In Europe. Where?
In the Netherlands, Dutch.
Oh, the Netherlands. Okay, gotcha. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I lived in Europe for some time, but I lived in Germany.
Okay, so du sprichst Deutsch?
Yeah, Deutsch, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you have any rebuttals or questions or challenges, or what can you think about?
Um, can I say something like? I mean, I feel like it's Nels time, so yeah, because I want to say something. Something great, you know. It takes a little time.
Yeah, take your time. Take your time, and I'll write it down.
Okay. So when I was young, I started to link myself, my own consciousness, with God. Like I say, the soul really existed, and I wanted to explain that to my brother, but my brother was like, "No, we are more like computers." But it's more, yeah. I was like, no, it's more. I feel like it's something spiritual. Some people have a higher side in spirituality, when you know what I mean. Yes, and later on in life, I linked my own consciousness. I say we are a part of God. Like, like I don't care what other people say or what other people believe, but we even if God created us, He did not create our soul. He did not create our consciousness. It's a part of Him. That's what I always believed. And yes, and later on in life, I was a Muslim, you know. So I asked. I don't know if I was Muslim in that time or not, but I think I still was, and I accepted the more nuanced view of Islam. So my own version, so to say. And the thing was, yes, I accepted evolution. I accepted my friend. I asked my friend if he believed in a God or a source. So he said yes, I believe there is something. And then he asked me, like, he asked me, what did God do before creation or before this universe? So later on in life, later on, I thought about that. So I thought, like, God's name is Creator, right? He is a creator. That's His name, right? So if God is eternal, did He always create? Like, that's what I thought. And I was like, so God always created, so we are living here in a multiverse, an eternal multiverse where God always created, because His name as creator, that is His attribute, according to religion. You know what I mean? So later on, I listened to Michio Kaku, and he came with the same idea. He said, like, in the Western Christian religion, and his own, like in school, and his own upbringing in Buddhism. He said in Buddhism everything is eternal, but in Christianity he says the universe is created. So the idea that he was talking about is the same as the idea I had. Like, we are living in a multiverse. God creates always. So that's something that I have in my mind. And later on, I tried my hardest best to be an atheist, but it didn't work. Like, yeah, I mean, the idea like multiverse doesn't take God away, when you know what I mean. There
Mhm.
are because God, the Creator, when you're looking at creation and other stuff, there's something like it's not only the cosmological argument. I mean, I believe in a multiverse, but I believe yes. I mean, everything is very detailed. Like this can't be random in my mind.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the sun is there, the moon is there, everything is on the line, everything. And not only that, not only the surroundings, but my life itself. Like I lived so much synchronicities. I tried to be an atheist, but those synchronicities don't let me be an atheist, because everything looks like as if it is written.
Mm.
And precognition, and that's something. So there are two things that let me stay a believer, besides the spiritual side, and that is precognition. Like we can foresee the future sometimes, like accurately, and it's not pseudoscience or anything. You know what I mean? I mean, you can learn. You can learn testimonies. You can learn everything when you know what I mean. So I am not religious in a strict sense, but I can believe when a Christian tells me if a Christian tells me that Jesus did visit him, I can believe that he is saying the truth. It does not mean that I believe everything what the Bible says is true, but I can believe that this being called Jesus, and maybe Krishna or other beings, we don't know. We are only here in the world to experience this life, so we don't need to use that arrogance to say to tell what reality is. We can speculate, but we will never know what the reality is.
Yeah.
That's something what I truly believe. And yes, and later on, I even heard a video on TikTok. Like the belief in materialism is very dangerous in a sense, and I will tell you why. Materialism, meaning only the material world exists, denies the half of our brain. There's another half of our brain that's sorry, I can't explain it right away, but there's we have intellectual thinking, and we have another side of our brain, and we need to feed our brain like we are feeding our body to stay healthy. We need to feed our brains to stay healthy as well. So in the materialistic sense, or in materialism, you are petrifying yourself. Like you're stopping, you're blocking yourself from thinking. And I feel like that's the problem with the religious thinking as well, like dogmatic thinking. And that's the problem that I have with atheism as well, because it's dogmatic thinking. It's like, no, only the materialistic world exists, nothing else exists. Don't block yourself from that other thought, block yourself from something that's literally innate in us since beginning of human experience, or since we are born. You know what I mean? Like like if we are materialistic, we can stop feeling emotions. We can stop feeling. We are like ending. No. We are ending ourselves in a way, like making ourselves like robots, like stone, like that materialistic nonsense. And there, yes, and
here's some questions maybe to kind of break down what we can get at here from all that, right? Like, are you familiar with parsimony?
no. Can you explain it, please?
Oh, okay. So with parsimony, it's considered a virtue, like something as a very valuable principle, right? That we want to use maybe as a tool. So parsimony is one of those virtues. So parsimony is to say that we don't want to assume, very little if we can. We only want to work with what we know if possible. We don't want to assume too many things because it's like introducing points of failure, right? So, for example, like if you want to explain lightning, like the ancients used to explain lightning by saying, well, basically we have to assume that there's this god named Zeus, and God gets angry, and God has all these emotions, and then God creates lightning, and then when God gets angry, he sends the lightning bolt from the sky. And so we now don't believe those things for the most part, right? Nowadays, we take a more parsimonious view, which is we just build on the things we know, that lightning is a product of natural processes, right? Like electrostatic electricity or whatever. So we don't assume the gods, we don't assume his anger, we don't assume all the things that go into explaining lightning. We try to look for the bare minimum to explain everything as much as possible, right? It's not really like a hard rule, but it's sort of just a guiding principle when it comes to things we only try to assume very little if we can, right?
Yeah.
So then there's these two things. There's these ways of looking at reality. There's dualism and there's non-dualism. So there's a way to look at nature as more than one thing, like a dual, like maybe two things. And then there's a way to look at reality as mainly just one thing, right? And so it would be more parsimonious to say that reality is made out of the one thing rather than the two. So if you like parsimony, if that is a virtue you want to use as a guide, you would probably want to build your ideas on non-dualism, right? Because it's more parsimonious. And so in that case, you start to build your epistemology. So does that make sense so far?
yes.
Okay.
What I want to say is like we have stone fast reality. You know what we have reality, like for making science, for making medicine, for other stuff that are truly facts, you know. But we are human beings, so we need to accept our other side too. It doesn't mean that we are sorcerers, or that we can. I mean, like, if a tree is a tree, then it's a tree. Or if lightning is lightning without God, you know what I mean? Like we know what lightning is because we are doing that stuff with science, but that doesn't change or other side or spiritual side, or you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because if we are becoming materialistic in a sense, I feel like it's really bad.
Mhm.
And I'm the problem that I have is dogmatism. So because let's say synchronicity is true, right?
Mhm.
We can't explain what it is, why it happens, but we can take it spiritually, like emotionally.
Mhm.
It helps us in our path. So but we need to accept facts. Like we are not in the room praying for health, but we
Mhm.
can pray, and we can use our science to find a solution
Mhm.
in both ways.
All right. So
Because yeah,
So,
I
what
was.
would you
Oh,
say is the most parsimonious view to explain synchronicity?
they will say it's coincidence, but it is too much coincidence. I mean, like, if I will tell you the stories I have experienced, like literally almost every day, sometimes that can't be coincidence in that way. I can't believe that as a coincidence.
And when you
Other
say synchronicity, are you defining synchronicity as like meaningful coincidences where events sort of appear related without any sort of causal connection?
yes,
Okay. So, and like you say, a materialist might say it's just probability or random chance. And you're saying the problem is this would require many assumptions about unlikely coincidence being meaningful and doesn't really explain why they feel significant, you might say.
yes, it's not only that. I mean, I feel like it's possible that it happens like one time or times or three times or four times, but not literally every time. Like, I will tell you a story. Maybe I sound crazy. I know, but
Oh,
I'm
we are all crazy. You're in good
yes.
company.
Okay.
Yeah.
um,
Well, after the story, I've been trying to get some words in. So.
Okay, yeah. You're next.
okay. I'm almost done. Uh, I will tell you an experience. For example, there was a time that I was in a kickboxing place, and on that moment, in that time, um, they were talking about the shower thing, like it was broken or something like that, and they wanted to fix it. Like father and son were talking about that. And do you know what happened that day? I mean, I was still an atheist. I still denied it, but this is one example. There are dozens of that examples. I went to my home, and do you know what? The my own shower thing was changed. I mean, I know it's silly, but
Hey,
it is an example.
you know, Exo Music says that synchronicity is events that seem related with no causal connection. Is it possible that there's a causal connection that maybe you're just unaware of, that is just not spiritual?
Sorry, the sound went off.
Oh, well, before I ask that question, let me let Nell jump in because I told her she could jump in first.
I'm just, before we got too deep into discussion, it's like I wanted to try to form like a baseline or like just things that we can find in common, since even though I'm an atheist and you're a theist, it's like, you know, some of the things that you said still resonate with me. And so it's like, I think that's, you know, worth, you know, stating and getting out in the open, where it's like, you know, my issue, it's like, it seems to me your issue isn't with materialism itself per se, or religion or atheism, but dogmatism. And it's like, you know, that's something that strongly resonates with me. I'm also against dogmatic thinking, and it's like, my issue isn't really with a theist being a theist. You know, it's like, it's when that thinking becomes dangerous, when it becomes unquestioning to the point of, if you question me, I'm going to harm you or harm the people you love. Like, that's the issue. And so I'm glad that we can all, like, three of us, agree that dogmatism is like one of the major underlying issues that, you know, humans face. And then the other thing I'd say that we find in common is that, you know, you have a problem with things just being random. And I do think that's, you know, that's not the case. Like, I don't think the universe, you know, even though I'm an atheist, it's like, to me, it's like when I'm looking at science and studying the behaviors of the natural world, it's like things aren't random. And I would say that nature itself isn't just, you know, random processes. I would say that they are guided processes, but not by an underlying God. So let's say that's another commonality we could say we have, even though we might disagree on the origin of the guidedness of the process.
Do you know what how I am thinking? I'm like a pirate. Like, like I don't fit in groups. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So what I want to say is, like, if we are saying like God guides, or I feel like that sounds a little bit literally Christian or Abrahamic in that sense. Mm-hmm. Like, he's literally guiding with his own hands. Mm-hmm. But I feel I'm more talking about in a spiritual sense, so not in a literal. It's really complicated. And what I want to ask Exi Music. He's, I think that's a friend of mine from Midvision. I want to ask him about if he can, like, yes, synchronicity, maybe that's random coincidences, but the precognition, like, not only precognition, like the foretelling from future events. Like, you can study that, the cases about that, and the last thing that I want to tell you guys is, I believe in a kind of a mental Wi-Fi in a sense. I will tell you what I mean. If I am feeling something, like something is bad or something happens or something else, like there's a possibility that my mother feels how I'm feeling right now. So what I really experienced is, like, my mother told me, like, her sixth sense is everything is all right. And I thought there was something very worse going on, and she told me no, there's nothing going on. And on the end, I really didn't want to believe her, but on the end, she had right. And last second, look at the story of Patrick Bet-David. I'm not telling you to about his political stuff or something else, but we are talking about consciousness and to believe in something like that. And he was like he was like crying or something like that. He had it bad, so he was praying to God or something, and about his mother, if he can contact his mother in a way. and a little time later, he got he got a phone of his own mother. And what I want to say about mental Wi-Fi is, even if there is no God, his mother did feel him. Do you know what I mean? Like there was that connection between Patrick and his mother. So even if there's no God, I feel there is still a spiritual connection between us humans.
Jojo, are you familiar with the telepathy tapes?
No.
You may be interested to look at that on YouTube, because it's a scientific exploration into what you're talking about, where they measure so-called telepathy among autistic children who can't speak, and they have all these tests set up to where they demonstrate their telepathic abilities. And you may want to look into that and see what the science says about that and see what the conclusions are so far. You may be very interested to look into that, because it may in many ways support your idea here. For others, I know that they're just going to reject such things out of hand because it doesn't fit the worldview they may hold. But I would just encourage everyone to always challenge yourself with things that seem absurd to you, because that's what philosophy is all about. It's all about that. And look at the evidence. If there is any evidence, look at it and determine for yourself if it constitutes real evidence or not. I'm not going to say if it is or not right here, because it's a little off topic. But as far as what you're saying about synchronicities and some of the things that you've observed in life like that, the way that I would explain it is that synchronicity is that meaningful coincidence that emerges naturally from the patterns of consciousness itself. So there's no extra causes or forces needed, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I would look at it. So this keeps the explanation kind of simple. Like one fundamental substrate, consciousness, produces both the events and the meaning we perceive without multiplying entities or like introducing any mystical causation. Like for me, causation is not necessarily fundamental. Like causation is sort of like another explanation that we sort of add on to relations. Like even causation isn't fundamental on quantum mechanics. It's not fundamental on general relativity. So even in science, causation is not assumed to necessarily be fundamental. There's just relations. And so the relations are the meaning that you perceive as well as the events we're talking about.
Yes, I need to go. Sorry, my phone is on. Yeah.
But go right ahead. All right, and we have Reality Gone Mental in the live stream. Hey, how's it going? Glad you could join, man. And you can definitely link in if you'd like, because we're taking challengers here for physicalism, qualia. A lot of folks have been saying qualia isn't real. It's kind of a philosophical confusion. And we've been trying to make I've been trying to make the case that qualia is the prerequisite for confusion. Like you have to have a quality of experience that differentiates between a confusion and anything else. So if you'd like to jump in, go right ahead. I'd really look forward to that. But it looks like our guy dropped out. I don't know if there's a bad connection or what.
Oh, that's a shame. I wanted to dive deeper into his theistic thinking. No.
Yeah. Like, you know me now, like the reason I don't really include things like some of the things that we talk about spirituality in that way. Like I oftentimes talk about spirituality, but I mean it as more of a subjective, internal introspection, meaning, journey of life, you might say. But I don't mean to say like ghosts and leprechauns and stuff like that.
Well,
Or gods. It's just not parsimonious. I don't include that in my worldview.
I'd say that's, one of the reasons why it's just so hard to talk about spirituality. Because, if people have, ever been paying attention to Sam Harris, it's like he's, been trying to redefine spirituality. And it's like, arguably there's, you could say that he hasn't been successful with that.
Yeah. I think because of the baggage, it's a baggage term. But really all terms you could argue are sort of baggage terms, like even atheism. Like some people would say, well, atheism means you say there is no God. Like not necessarily, but then they'll point to the Stanford Encyclopedia, or something and say, well, actually you're wrong. Look here, it says here in philosophy, this is what it is. So you're just using a colloquial term or whatever. It's like there's so much.
I get what you're saying, but I would also say though it's like a gradient. It's like some words just have more baggage than others. And
Yeah, that's true.
I would say God is one of the, like, spirituality. God, it's like, sure, there's so many different ways you can look at the word now, but like take God for example. It's like it's just been so ingrained in our history what that usually entails. Where it's like if you try to say God is the highest hierarchical thing that you believe in, like that just seems like out of left field to a lot of people. Taking the Jordan Peterson example.
Look here, Bucko. I'm not going to have you define atheism according to your anecdotal and very preposterous ideas that are just an expression of your mommy issues. Go clean your room.
Like, to me, atheism is far more parsimonious than theism, at least definitionally. It's like you can come up with so many concepts of God, of what God means. But it's like atheism, it's like I can only really think of two. You're either taking the psychological, like, disbelief position, like, you're acting like an agnostic, or you're taking the more philosophical, metaphysical definition of I'm stating a proposition.
Here's a good one. I haven't thought about this one in a while. Opinion on Roger Penrose, Sir Roger Penrose. Of course, he's gotten himself into the consciousness game ever since his book. What was that? The Emperor's New Clothes or something like that. And he kind of developed the Orc-Or theory of mind, which is kind of like a materialistic sort of accounting for consciousness. Basically, he says that consciousness or qualia states are the result of a collapse of a wave function. But I don't see how that gets around the hard problem of consciousness myself. It's just more explaining consciousness in terms of things that they're not. Like,
what is Sir Roger Penrose? Has he stated he is a materialist?
Yeah, he's a materialist, definitely. He basically says that, but he also says that consciousness cannot be described in mathematical terms, and he oftentimes resorts to Gödel's incompleteness theorem to say that there is no equation for understanding the equation.
Yeah.
Basically every axiom is based on a deeper truth, and even that deeper truth is based on a deeper axiom, and it goes on infinitum.
Yeah, I know Sir Roger Penrose, he was responsible for, or one of the big ones responsible for saying that
He's just not a very smart person. That's the only thing I know.
that consciousness can't be reduced down to computation.
Right. And that's the part where I'm confused on, because I thought I heard him say in one of his recent panel discussions that ultimately he's a physicalist and he looks for physical explanations.
Mhm.
And I guess that's part of the or. So I guess what he's saying is it's going to have to be explained in terms of quantum mechanics, not necessarily classical mathematics or classical logic.
Mhm.
But he also stated that that's been one of his big mistakes in his career of trying to tackle the problem of consciousness to begin with. Now his partner there, what's his name? Forget his name, but he also, he's more spiritual minded. Alex K, thank you for joining, my brother. How you doing?
Hey, what's up? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, bro.
Hey, how you guys doing?
We're doing good, man. We've been on and just talking about qualia and mental states versus, idealism and things like that.
Yeah. No opposition today so far?
In the live chat, for the most part, nobody's brave enough to step up to the challenge.
Yeah. So what kind of piqued the reason why I kind of wanted to come up is because, the Roger Penrose, Stuart Hameroff situation is interesting. I think you're correct in everything you said, like thus far. Like it doesn't really solve the hard problem. It just says, I guess, I don't know, a little bit of background on OR. So like Roger Penrose, I think it was 1989.
Yep.
He wrote The Emperor's New Mind.
Yeah, New Mind.
And basically, he was talking about how consciousness is not classically algorithmic. It's not algorithmic, meaning that like classical physical processes cannot account for it, cannot be said to be responsible for consciousness. It had to be something non-algorithmic, and so like the obvious candidate there is something quantum, due to the apparent randomness. And then he hooked up with Stuart Hameroff later on about the microtubules and how there might be quantum coherence in the microtubules in the neurons in the brain. And so they have OR, but it doesn't really explain, like, the hard problem of consciousness for like a regular physicalist would be something like, why does it feel like something to be a bunch of neurons firing? But then like OR, now it's just the hard problem of microtubules and quantum wave function collapse. Why does it feel like something to be a quantum wave function collapse? Now Penrose is like pretty materialistic, pretty physicalistic. I don't know if he like says what he is or not, but then Hameroff takes it in like a much more like, I don't know, spiritual, maybe non-material, non-physical direction. So it's kind of interesting to watch it play out, but ultimately, like, I don't know, it's interesting, but it doesn't necessarily do a whole lot of work for the philosophical conversation, at least right now, still early.
He's still like, I think Donald Hoffman, I think in one of their, they have these consciousness conferences out in Tucson every so often, and Donald Hoffman says he asked Stuart the same question every time. How does OR explain just one conscious experience? Let's not even talk about consciousness. Just one experience, like the taste of chocolate. How does OR actually explain that? And he hasn't got an answer yet.
Yeah. Hoffman always says they have no points on the board. The materialists have 0 points on the board, dude, in terms of explaining experiences. Yeah.
Exactly. Now you wouldn't think that if you left it up to my live chat in here.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, same with mine, dude. Yeah,
I know. I saw that today.
Yeah.
But it's really amazing that it's always kicking the can. It's always explaining consciousness in terms of something else. You know, it's never can consciousness just be its own thing or its own phenomena. It has to be explained in terms of some other physical thing that we see in our conscious experience. So it's always like, you know, we look into the screen of perception and the things in that screen is supposed to explain the screen. And for me, that's just kind of circular.
Right. Yeah. Because it has to emerge, because that is the presupposition after all. That is my assumption, is that it emerges. And if it does emerge, then I must explain it in terms of something physical. Like, I don't have any other option with that assumption. Right? Like, nobody goes, I mean, some people do, but these physicists are not going to go, oh, maybe I made a bad assumption. Maybe it's not the case that it emerges from physicality, you know?
But, and I mean, like Scott has been saying earlier, it's like maybe we're just looking at it from the wrong picture, like we're looking at it conceptually wrong. But also maybe if the physicalist is right, perhaps the issue though is just that the brain, you know, which is widely considered one of the most, if not the most complex structure in the known universe, maybe it's just too complex to understand for our understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the most complex, like, physical object we know about, I think. And, you know, I do leave room for uncertainty. But I feel like, you know, and obviously, you know, I don't know, take this for whatever you will, but I feel like we can be reasonably certain about some things. Like, and it's based on how we define things, right? So if we define subjective experience as first person, private, right? If it is the case that it's not, like, measurable from the outside, right? Like, you can't direct, like, if that is the case, and it's also the case that we define physical stuff in purely third person objective language, then it seems pretty, like, trivial to be like, oh, expecting first person experience to pop out a third person description is, like, not possible. You know, but I definitely leave some room for, like, maybe I'm, like, tricking myself linguistically or something, but it just doesn't seem plausible. It just really doesn't. Like, and I don't think complexity, like, solves that conceptual issue. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no. I'd say the hard problem is one of the things that drove me to being purely agnostic towards the whole issue. So.
And Examusic says, let's go to the supposed proofs of the hard problem. They're silly. Well, you have to understand, and we've been over this before, is that the hard problem is only a problem on materialism. It's not that the idealism is saying there's really a hard problem. We're saying that that's just a bad philosophy that you're starting with, materialism, and it leads to, you know, the hard problems, right? The conceptual gap, you know, category errors and things like that. So it's not that we're trying to prove there's a hard problem. Like, we're trying to say that the hard problem actually goes away on idealism. So there's nothing for us really to prove in that case. But it is a useful talking point, because if it's sort of like an internal critique. So if we take materialism on and we play that game, then we have to point out the problems, right? Just like we can point out the problems with idealism or panpsychism or any other ism, right? We can look at the problems and then we can compare those frameworks and see what better explains, what, you know, inherits less problems, you know, overall. It's like Nell was asking me, well, how does idealism explain disassociation? Like, how do you explain that? What, you know, But it seems to me that that's less of a problem than, say, explaining an experience at all on materialism.
Yeah, it's not a problem in principle. Like, the thing about this is a good question. Like, it's in the right direction of like, well, what is dissociation? How do you explain that? How does it occur? Why does it occur? Right. And we're definitely going to hit some bedrock on that. And it's going to be like a little bit brute. But the thing that I think saves the day in the case of dissociation as a sort of like explanatory mechanism, if you will, is that we know it happens. Like, it is an empirically true fact that dissociation exists. And I would even go so far as to say that it is in the nature of mind to dissociate. And it's not just like DID, like these extreme cases of dissociated, dreaming, right? Like, when you can't remember something, that's like what I ate for breakfast last Tuesday. I am dissociated from that experiential state right now. So it just seems to be the case that like it's in the nature of mind to dissociate. And so you would just make like an inductive case that, look, the appearance of many minds, like if we take it to be the case that idealism is true, right? And there's one mind appearing as many, the best explanation for that appearance of multiplicity inductively is just dissociation.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is that we already know that there's a disassociation, because I don't know what's in any of you guys' subjective first-person experience. That's the whole thing. Now, Examusic, you say, my point is the hard problem with materialism is non-existence. Great. Can you please explain how an experience can come from non-experience? Please show that.
And while he's doing that, it's like, yeah, that's like, I was trying to offer pushback with against idealism, because it shouldn't just go unchallenged. And when I was talking about the disassociative concept, and so my whole thing was, it's like, so why is it that if we look at the naturalistic explanation of the world and try to fit that in with idealism, where it's like, so you're starting out with this simple universal mind that is a one conscious field at the fundamental level, and then from that fundamental level you get all these localized consciousness experiences. So as time goes on and the universe gets more complex, we get more complex consciousness experiences, especially when biological evolution gets introduced, and eventually we get something like a brain, and then we get something like a human brain that can has the most I would say advanced or complex processes of self-reflection, of being able to self-reflect, and all these ways of self-expressing itself, and realizing that it's self-expressing. And so to me is like, so what is it about it that seems to be like the natural progression of consciousness? So like, why is it wanting to go in this direction and not another direction?
Well, it could be the case that there's a teleology to it. Like, I don't really, the why questions are hard, right? And I think they're going to be hard under sort of any view. I personally, I'm like, yeah, I'm fine with just saying like, I don't know. And I don't think it's like a major issue, but again, I just kind of rest assured in the fact that we kind of know this is what minds actually do. And the why is kind of up for interpretation, I guess, in a sense, right?
All right, so if you're fine with eventually bottoming out at I don't know, which I'm fine with that. I would say as an agnostic, it's like, yeah, I don't know either. What I would the one pushback I'd say on that though is, are you fine then with a materialist saying I don't know? And if not, what's the asymmetry that allows an idealist to say that but not a materialist?
It depends on the question, right? Like a materialist saying, I don't know how consciousness emerges from physical matter. No, that's not acceptable, because in a physical world, in any mechanistic world, there must be a mechanism. Like it just has to be the case, right?
Okay, so what you're saying is that there's special pleading, because it's like we can say this is the cause and effect of an atom to a molecule to tissue, and so on and so forth. But then when it comes to consciousness, you're just like, I don't know. And
yeah, it's magic.
Like, okay, gotcha.
It's magical thinking. Yeah, like to be fully consistent, right? A physicalist worldview should have physical mechanisms for any kind of emergence.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But like when it gets to like more fundamental questions, why does something exist rather than nothing? Well, that might be a bad question because it kind of presupposes that nothing could exist, which is probably a bad assumption. But yeah, I don't know. There might be acceptable cases. Like why does this universe, like the fine-tuning problem, for example? I don't know if there's necessarily an answer to that. Like, why do we have these laws of physics instead of some others? Why is this universe situated in a way that allows for life? Why is gravity this constant instead of this other one? Like, some of those, I'm kind of fine with them just being like, I don't know, dude. It's just how it is,
So Brian brings up that the hard problem is solved because the mechanism is the brain itself and the complex activity of it. Oh, okay, cool. Problem solved.
Great answer. Yeah. No, I was watching his comments. The last comment, it said something like medication.
Yeah.
Having a physical. What was it?
Yeah, blocks certain. Let me pull it back up to be sure. Make sure I don't lie. Yeah, it says, well, that's why certain drugs can kill pain. It cuts off the inputs that fill receptors, blocking the experiential.
Yeah, so it's just a correlation. Like I know that for many people that encounter the subject, they regard that statement right there as a causal indication that these receptors are the sort of location of your pain, or the generation, the location of the generation of your pain. But this is still just a correlation. Like under an idealist view, like everything is made up of consciousness, including the drug that you ingested. So it's one mental process interacting with another mental process. Like that doesn't give you ontological identity or the direction of primacy,
So that problem of causation, Hume's problem of causation.
Yeah. Oh, and so you seem to be all right with brute facts, Alex, and so am I. I was just wondering though, like, do you try to mitigate it to as few brute facts as possible?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Yeah, because I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a view that results in like brute facts ad infinitum, like it's probably a bad view, right?
Yeah, you just say everything is a brute fact.
Right.
Nothing needs explanation then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'd say that goes back to Scott's point of parsimony and just trying to make as few assumptions as possible. And I would say you can extend that to this. It makes the most sense to just have as few brute facts as possible.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, are you familiar with Stephen Wolfram?
Yeah, hypergraph theory thing. Yeah.
So I think he got into it with, I think it was Donald Hoffman. They had a debate one time, and Donald Hoffman brought up the whole parsimony argument. And his view was that, yeah, I understand how you use that as a guide, but in every case, if not most cases, like most cases at least, that it's never been, the explanation for the natural world has never been parsimonious. Always been complex. It's always been, like he says, if like hydrodynamics, the most parsimonious view at one point was that, well, how do you explain something simple like the flow of water? Well, the most parsimonious view is that, well, all the molecules flow in one direction. But as we learned, actually they don't. The molecules are all over the place. So that's not parsimonious, as it turned out.
I would counter that with this. Parsimony is not ultimate truth, but it's a methodology. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of trying to understand the world efficaciously. And so what I mean by that is, like, when we think in terms of parsimony, we are trying to be as conservative as possible with our like positive claims or our assumptions or whatever, until we were forced out of those assumptions.
Right.
Until we are forced to reconsider and add some new entity, whether it's a proposition or, whatever. Right. Like if what we're finding forces us to increase the complexity of our like model, then so be it, and that's fine. But I just think it's like a way of being. It's a way of being skeptical and conservative until like forced out of that position.
Yep, I agree. It's a great guide. It's Occam's razor, and it's actually scientific. It's like lightning, being the product of a god or gods that got angry and did this and that resulted in lightning, is not as parsimonious as just looking at what we already know to be the case about that. I mean, at first it was just,
I would just say it's a category error. Like, if you try to say, try to shove parsimony into the realm of science, it's like it's not going to work out. It's like science has its own methodology of the scientific method, and it's like you go through the steps of observation, forming a hypothesis, testing, all that, and it's like you just go where the data leads you, and you can just be like, well, at the end of the day, and then look at the results and be like, well, this isn't parsimonious, we need to toss it out. It's like, that's not how that works. To me, it's like parsimony shines in something like the realm of philosophy, like
trying to test assumptions and expose hidden assumptions. In X music, again, man, you're still doing the correlation argument. You say non-physical consciousness would be universal and non-subjective. Subjectivity comes from things within one person's body. You're just begging the question.
Well, it's also just a contradiction in terms, right? Like, consciousness by definition cannot be non-subjective. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And I would say that but with the parsimony also goes, like, it should be coupled with explanatory power, because that goes back to, like, if you just name everything as a brute fact, it's like, sure, that might be super simple, but it has zero explanatory power.
Right.
And if you have something that has lots of explanatory power but has a billion other assumptions, like, that also just doesn't get you anywhere. So it's like, to me, it has to have both simplicity and explanatory power.
It's kind of the angle I've been taking on solipsism lately, because I'm an idealist, right? And so a lot of internet people at least want to say, well, idealism collapses into solipsism, and it's like, first of all, that doesn't make any sense. It's just like a slippery slope fallacy or something. But second of all, like, there's another way to attack that problem, which is that solipsism doesn't explain anything. Why would I hold a view that just everything's brute? Like, you're all a figment of my imagination. All of that is just a brute fact. Like, It has no explanatory power. Yeah, it's the most parsimonious, but it doesn't explain anything. So I think that's the easy way out of that view. Nobody should take it seriously for that reason.
I agree.
Yeah, and you know, and ultimately, I think a lot of this bottoms out to, I keep saying language and culture. It's like that's why the same arguments just get repeated in different ways. It's like it's so hard for folks to get away from this hidden assumption that correlation makes causation. You know, it's like it doesn't. It's like it's really kind of interesting how in other contexts, like if you talk about God or if you talk about this or that, miracles, this and that, synchronicities from the spirits or whatever, they're quick to point out, oh, well, the correlation doesn't prove cause. I mean, yeah, correlation doesn't prove causation, but somehow in this case, there's an exception can be made.
Yeah, it's a special. It's because it fits this kind of scientific narrative. So, like, I'll give you another example. A few months ago, I say this all the time. So a few months ago, RFK Jr. right came out with some study. I don't even remember the title of the study, but it had to do with there was a correlation between higher autism rates in children born from women that took Tylenol during pregnancy. So there were higher autism rates in these children, right? So there was a correlation between Tylenol usage during pregnancy, but no mechanism, right? No mechanism. We don't know like why there's this correlation. And so like RFK comes out, presents the study. Donald Trump was like, "You should stop taking Tylenol," and they all freaked out. Like all the TikTok scientists and YouTube scientists, they're all like, "This is terrible. Correlation is not causation. Correlation," and they're right. They're absolutely right. Correlation is not causation, and the reason is because, like, look, if we don't have a mechanism, it could be the Tylenol, but it could also easily be the inflammation, which is the reason the woman was taking the Tylenol, and the inflammation could be leading to her because we don't have a mechanism. We cannot discern which one it is based off that limited amount of information. But then those same exact people will sit here and be like, no, the brain generates consciousness because brain damage. And it's like, oh my gosh, dude.
Brain damage argument. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never really liked that one either. And I think a lot of people may point to the Phineas Gage thing. Like, I think you were reacting to that video I reacted to. And by the way, I had that guy on today.
Oh, did you? The caller or?
That caller.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we were trying to field some calls, and I think one person called and challenged him. But then that's all we got after that, and he had to dip. But yeah, me and him are gonna do more work together as well. And by the way, I would really love it, Alex, if we could team up on stuff too, because I've been watching the hell out of your episodes, man. And by the way, guys, please like and subscribe to his channel. It's the Reality Gone Mental, Alex K and Reality Gone Mental.
Yeah. So I have this channel that I'm on now. It's Alex K _official. The other channel is Reality Gone Mental. I co-host that with Stash. And then I'm on TikTok at Alex K __ official. 2 underscores.
I really feel like y'all's channel is gonna blow the fuck up, man. Because you guys have a really good I like your flow. Like your videos are really, really nice, man. You guys do a really great job.
I appreciate that, dude. But yeah, we can definitely work together. We'll see what falls out. I just kind of found your channel and I was looking through it because you made a comment on one of my posts or Reality Gone Mental. Somewhere you made a comment. Oh, you said strong emergence is magical thinking. I was like, huh, who is this guy, right? Because I agree with that statement, right? But not many people understand even what strong emergence is meant to point to. And basically it's emergence without an explanation. And yeah, that is magical thinking. And so anyway, I was looking through your channel and I saw that you had reacted to that Forrest Valkai and Xena thing or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is a good one. I want to critique this as well. So That's
Yeah, I
all that
played a
played
little
out.
bit of it today to kind of highlight that. Because remember how Zena was like, he was saying that you're doing the correlation. How do you get around that fallacy of correlation equals causation? And then they just went right back into more
Correlations.
correlation.
Yeah.
I would really like to pick Xena's brain, because even though she is a materialist, it's like she doesn't seem dogmatic about it. Like,
No, she's cool. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I thought she did. She was more inquisitive. I like the way that she was approaching that conversation more than Forrest. Forrest just has, all the dogma packed in. She, in the beginning, I couldn't tell. It almost sounded like she said she was a Gnostic, which would be interesting. But I'm not sure.
Well, she debated Jordan Peterson. I think that's how she got discovered to be co-host. She got very popular for giving Jordan Peterson a run for his money on atheism versus theism.
And it's a real shame when it comes to Forrest, because it's like he has this giant blind spot. But he's a brilliant biologist and seems to be a great trans ally. So it's this he's very dogmatic though when it comes to the materialism.
Well, and it's almost understandable, because it is a kind of a slippery slope. Like, look, there are a lot of fundamentalist religious people out there that are like literally claiming that the Earth is 6,000 years old, that evolution is fake news, that this and that and whatever else, right? And so, like, it's admirable to defend the scientific project against these like naysayers, right, who are spreading scientific misinformation and whatnot, but right, with balance, right? So like, if you're like pushing back against idealism in Forrest's eyes is probably the same thing as pushing back against like fundamentalist religion. And there's just not a recognition that like, hey, there's like subtle differences here, and this kind of calls for a deeper perspective that you're just missing out on. Like, he just hasn't realized that. Maybe he will one day, I don't know.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that their job is not to agree with the caller.
True.
Because if they do, then they're not going to be invited to keep co-hosting or hosting these shows. It's like, Matt Dillahunty is another one, and we were talking about that as well. I tried to steel man some theists, and I just wanted to kind of like smuggle in the idealistic argument as a way, because he doesn't take arguments about idealism up front. Like, he just wants to know, what does that have to do with your fucking God? That's what I want to know. How does that prove your God? So I wanted to steel man, but they're like, we don't do, we want your at your real position. So I did the dishonest thing, and I called in as somebody else, as a theist, Christian theist, and I tried to talk about that. And Matt told me that Qualia was nonsense, and he said Qualia just is bullshit, and he rejects it. And
he's on his Daniel Dennett.
Yeah, he said, because Daniel Dennett said that introspection is unreliable, and Qualia is based on introspection. And I'm like, well, how did you go outside of introspection to know that introspection is bullshit?
That's a good point.
Like,
yeah,
well, you're gone, jackass. This is the worst question I've ever heard.
Wow. Wow, your position is self-defeating. You lose. Like, and he says you lose. That's crazy.
Yeah.
With Dennett, right? I'm not gonna pretend like I'm an expert on Dennett's work or anything. Like, I know he gave a lot of neuroscientific or cognitive science examples to like support what he was talking about and all that kind of stuff. I need to do I've looked at his work before. I need to look at it again in detail, but it just seems to be the case that Dennett set up like a very strong version of Qualia to knock it down. And I think that you can take a softer position on what, like, how you define qualia, and it's still a problem for physical. Like, it still cannot be explained away in whatever, like, behavioral, or relational or structural, like, description. Like the whole point, the whole project of what Dennett was trying to do is saying, look, this, like, concept of qualia is, like, not real. It's incoherent, and whatever's left over can be explained in terms of brain activity. I don't think it's that simple. I don't think that's the case. I mean, it is still a very minority position. I think it's only like 6%. I think panpsychism has a greater following than eliminativism.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, didn't Dennett take the position that, you know, everything is physical and therefore consciousness is an illusion? Or was that
essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. But he was, like, more rigorous about it than that, right? Like, so he tried to make, when he says consciousness is an illusion, what he means to say is, like, yeah, if you define qualia as, like, that which is ineffable, that which has intrinsic qualities, that which is directly apprehensible by introspection, and there's, like, one other criteria, I can't remember what it is, then, like, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's complicated, but.
Well, I mean, from my understanding, it seems like, you know, if I were to try to steelman materialism and, you know, try to put forward its most logical, you know, theory, like, it seems like the one where it says everything is physical seems to be, like, the most, you know, parsimonious one out of all of them, where it's just like, you know, it's non-dualistic. It's, you know, the immaterial is really material. You know, would you agree with that? And if you do agree, that's the most strongest form of materialism. What would you say are the issues with the strongest form of materialism?
I guess the strongest form of let's just say physicalism, right? Same thing. Like, I know what you mean by that, but, like, the strongest form of physical is, yeah, everything is physical, and they mean that in a reductive way. So essentially, the entailment of that view, if you say that everything is reductively physical, what you're actually saying is that in the event that we have a full, complete theory of physics, there will be no questions left to ask. No single question will not be reducible to physics. In other words, another way of saying that is the entire reality, all of existence, is fully capturable in quantitative language. When you say it like this, that sounds freaking like an extreme position, but it's one that people take for granted, right? Like, they just, physics can explain everything. And it's like, are you sure about that? That sounds weird. In walks consciousness, right? That resists that kind of physical description, at least for now. Anyway, does that answer your question? I don't know.
No, it's you know, it's one thing to say, okay, everything's physical, but then it's like, all right, well, if we actually take a look at that and what that entails, you know, problems do start to arise.
Exactly. Yeah, namely the existence of consciousness. This is the biggest problem. I mean, also, like, it's kind of strange that, and I don't know how this is going to play out in the future. It could be the case that we figure out some way to observe dark matter. But apparently that's something that resists physical description as well. Who knows what that even entails or will turn out to entail in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as scientists say, it's just a placeholder. It could mean almost anything.
Yeah. It could just be a mathematical artifact of, like, our theories, you know. It might literally be nothing.
I mean, from my understanding, they're pretty sure dark matter exists. It's dark energy that's, like, it's not only a placeholder, but it's like it might not exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's well, it looks like no one's really deciding to step up to really do a challenge, and that's kind of what I want. Last week I did my first one. I had a few good challengers, a few of them. I don't know what happened today, But
Do you pay for this service here, the StreamYard?
yeah.
I might have to get that, dude. Also, I was just curious about like, what's your background? Like, how did you get into all this, and like, where are you coming from? Did you like, are you coming from a religious background, a secular background? Like, what got you interested in this topic?
I think all of the above. So like, I was not raised in a religious home at all. Like, we were probably just like everybody else, just what you call a cultural Christian, or didn't really think too much about it. But I got to that age of 19, 20 years old and started having these questions and became a very dogmatic, zealous Jehovah's Witness. And I used to debate so much, and I moved up in the organization, and eventually I learned about epistemology and how that works. And it led me right out the door of religion. And then I became like more of an atheist, like an angry atheist type phase. And then I finally got over that.
You were in your Reddit atheist phase.
Yeah. Where I was always wanting to own the Christian or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got out of that. I started seeing that was kind of stupid. So then I started getting into putting my own skepticism to the test. Like saying, well, why am I so cocksure about my beliefs or unbeliefs or whatever? So I started questioning a lot of things, and just started studying a lot of shit, all from everything from Deepak Chopra type shit to Hinduism philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, what that power of manifestation shit, all of this kind of stuff. And it just never stuck. It was just still like more religion for me. And it didn't really do it. But then I discovered Rupert Spira with non-dualism, and that kind of piqued my interest. And then I discovered Bernardo Castro around 2013, 2014. And that's when the light clicked on. I was like, oh, okay. So now I understand why I'm so uncomfortable as an atheist. Like there's like this middle way that I need to discover. Because I just didn't like the dogma associated with these isms, But idealism was a little different, for some reason. So I started looking into that, and so far it's the only thing that really makes a good logical argument. Like I'm one of these fallibilists. So I admit that it's sort of based on a framework assumption, but at least it's an assumption that seems to be a better model than the other ones I've heard thus far. So I kind of just go with it, man, and gotten more well-versed in it and kind of passionate about it. Started my whole YouTube channel around it. And yeah, that's how I came to that.
That's cool, man. Yeah, it does seem. I didn't discover Bernardo till like last year, I think. But yeah, it does seem to be just less wrong. Like to say that it's ultimately true is like, like, I don't know, dude, maybe, but like it seems like something in that neighborhood must be true because it's really the only thing that's like fully consistent,
And on the other hand, when I think about reason, I did a video on that. I did a lot of deep dive into reading and researching this thing we call rationality and reason. And, even your rationality can be questioned. It's like, are we really that rational? Or are we just better at rationalizing things? But, as it turns out, that really we're kind of still stuck in an epistemic loop anyways. So there's really, that's the tool. That's all we really have. All we really have is language, rationalization, and stuff like that. So I'm like, I'm comfortable to argue for things that are ultimately assumptions and but more coherent within the framework. So I'm comfortable with that, but I always leave the door open to be wrong. I think that's a virtue. I mean, I know it's virtue signaling. It doesn't prove anything, but it's a virtue that I think is useful,
Yeah, I think so too. I was talking to this theist on TikTok yesterday or the day before, and I told him I'm a fallibilist, and he goes, "Oh, so that means anything you're telling me right now, any statement that you make might be false." And I'm like, yeah, but he took that to be like a reductio or something. I'm just like, dude, it's called like humility. Like, maybe you should try it sometime. Like, goodness gracious.
Just ask Nell. Nell, how many precepts have we been arguing with over the years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those precepts, man, they're like, well, if you can be wrong about anything that you think is true, then why should I trust you?
Yeah, no,
Right.
It does boggle my mind that people will look at humility as
Weakness.
as the failing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weakness. What about you, Nell? What's your background?
So, unlike Scott, I did not grow up in a secular household. You know, I mean, I grew up here in the United States, in the state of Pennsylvania, at a devout Catholic household, strict Catholic conservative, and you know, I was knee deep in it. You know, my parents sent me to private Catholic school run by nuns. I was in CCD at, you know, my local church, like learning about all this stuff. And, you know, and when it comes to the the introduction of the internet, it's like I was on those message boards as like a freaking 12-year-old kid, you know, arguing with adults about the existence of God. You know, that was me. I was that type of nerd.
Sounds like exactly where you're supposed to be at 12. No.
I know, right? And so, you know, I've eventually this started. I'd say it started with, you know, my journey towards atheism started with me questioning the hypocrisy of the church. And, you know, it's like, you know, like, why are we, it's like when I first started to, you know, become friends with, you know, gay people, it's like, you know, I'm taught that you're going to hell, and it's like, but you seem like such a nice person, you know. It's just like, you know, stuff wasn't adding up. And then, you know, eventually, you know, you stop looking at the hypocrisies, and you're starting to go like, all right, well, let's look at the very nature of God. Does, you know, what does this add up? And, you know, it's like, you know, eventually that all this line of questioning built up, and, you know, eventually it was just like, all right, well, God doesn't exist. And that itself was a very scary thing, because it's like I wanted God to exist, and it's like, and now without God, it's like I was in, you know, it's like my entire foundation just, you know, crumbled beneath me. And so it's like, I was talking with Scott earlier, where it's like, all right, well, you know, a lot of atheists who become, or, you know, a lot of theists who become atheists, you know, it's like their religious thinking doesn't just magically disappear. It's like, you know, without God, it's like now I'm in this nihilistic, you know, free fall. And it's like, so I was, you know, a nihilist for a long time. And then, you know, I eventually, you know, was able to claw myself out of religious thinking. And, you know, and I'd say that's still an ongoing process. It's like, you know, dogmatic thinking, you know, all of us fall into that, and, you know, it's on us to realize it and try to avoid it. But it's like, you know, eventually I stumbled upon, you know, existentialism, absurdism. It's like, you know, oh, we can, you know, either, you know, create our own meaning or try to create meaning in the face of the absurdity of the universe, you know, that sort of thing. So
yeah, that's another reason why idealism is cool, is because, like, or maybe not even idealism per se, but just like thinkers like Bernardo Kastrup, like Rupert Spira, and I don't know, Advaita Vedanta and stuff. Like, you can realize that there is this middle path between absolute mechanistic nihilism, like you're just a pile of atoms, reductionism, and like religious dogma, religious fundamentalism, or like some kind of like theism or whatever. Like, there is this realization that can occur. It's like, look, the meaning it's never been lost. It's always been there. We've just been kind of trained to ignore experience as a part of our scientific process. And then that scientific process, that methodology became a metaphysics. And it's like, yeah, you don't have to like make that move. You don't have to make it your metaphysics. Like, it actually causes problems when you do. So it's probably a good idea not to. Like, not only does it cause like the meaning crisis, but it also causes like the hard problem of consciousness, for example. Right. So,
yeah. So after that, it's like, it's like, okay, so it's like I questioned the God concept, and then so I'm like, all right, well, if I'm going to be, as consistent as possible about this, it's like I can't just be skeptical about that thing. I need to question every belief I just took for granted, and so that is led me to question free will, ethics, meaning, just everything. So it's just like, and then it came to a point where it's like I just took materialism for granted, and then it's like I need to start looking under the rock of this thing called materialism. And I eventually met people like Scott, Sophia, Paul, and it's like they helped me deconstruct that. And now I'm an agnostic when it comes to materialism and idealism and panpsychism and all that. So it's just it's an ongoing journey. And just recently, the thing I've realized about myself is that I'm a trans woman. So there's that I've been dealing with. So life is just one continuous journey of discovery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's life, man. Anyways, Alex K, what is your story before we head on out, man? I'd like to learn more about your story as well.
Oh yeah. So I'm ethnically Jewish. Well, depending on who you ask. My dad was Jewish, my mother wasn't. So according to some people, I'm not actually Jewish, but I don't really care about the label. Like whatever the case, the whole side of my whole dad's side is Jewish. Not really super religious, but ethnically Jewish. I was raised by my mother mostly, and she was like kind of on and off again Christian. So again, not like super religious, but some kind of notes of spirituality there. But I think at a very young age, I think I remember like having realizations at like 8 or 9 or 10 years old of like, yeah, if there is such a thing as like some kind of like God or whatever, it would not be like this. Like the Bible is like, it would not take the form of human psychology through the stories. Like, I don't know. I just became like very aware at a very young age that the sort of religious story is like very egoic. And it just didn't seem to be like super plausible to me. So, but I wasn't like dogmatic about it. I was like kind of agnostic or whatever. I definitely did like hope that there's something like a God exists or whatever. I definitely had like, I don't know, on and off again, like bouts with like maybe some very loose form of Christianity, but nothing like regular or consistent or really super solid. But I've also had like psychedelic experiences from a very young age, which kept me very open and non-committal to any particular view. But that being said, I think I was just like a naive materialist for most of my life, until at some point, I had a pretty big experience that caused me to question the nature of the self, the nature of the ego, the nature of the idea. Well, I lost the ego, right? The ego went bye-bye temporarily. And, kind of as Nell was describing, right? When something so big as like your identity is questionable, and you've always taken that to be, you've always taken it to be the case, like on, whatever, you didn't even know you could question your identity. Once that happens, it kind of opens the door for you to question everything else. And once you start flipping rocks over, you start to find the worms. And that being said, I kind of like discovered idealism. I didn't have any idea about Like I had a loose understanding of like Eastern philosophy in the sense that like Hinduism exists, Buddhism exists. I didn't know what the hell they were saying. I didn't know anything about any of that, you know? And then so I just started to like kind of dig into all of that. And here we are.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a DMT experience that kind of opened my eyes to the dissolution of self and all of this stuff, which really contributed to my journeys into spirituality and things of that nature as well. Losing the idea of the self is a lot more to it than it sounds like. Like it sounds like, okay, so what? But if you ever actually experience that shit, it's awful, but at the same time, it's glorious. And it just leaves you with a very profound new direction in life somehow. And
well, it's death. It's death and rebirth, dude. Like literally, it's you die, and you are reborn. Yeah.
So I have not had any psychedelic experience, but I would say I've come across, to accept a cosmic perspective through just an intellectual means of studying science, like Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson with, their whole, able to connecting everything through. It's like, everything is stardust and, the universe is not, not only within us, but, we are the universe. It's like,
Oh, that reminds me.
We're all interconnected.
Yeah, definitely. That reminds me, you saying that we are the universe looking back at itself or whatever. I kind of left out a big part of my story, actually. So in 2015, my dad committed wuicide. I don't know what I can say on YouTube or whatever. Committed wuicide, right? And left a note. Like, so you guys don't have to be like uncomfortable. It's fine. Like, I've healed from the trauma. It's totally fine. Left a note that said, energy never ceases to exist. It only changes forms. This kind of like cliche, like spiritual connotation. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that mean? Right. So I've kind of been, this is like maybe the most major part of my journey to like figure out what's going on metaphysically. What is reality? What is existence? Like all these existential questions stemmed from that note, trying to figure out what that means. And ultimately, I think I understand what he was pointing at now. I think I do. But I had no idea what he was talking about at the time. Like, it just seems like something people say, and it's like a little bit pseudoscience-y. It's kind of like, what, but yeah, I think it points at the idea that something like idealism is true. There is some universal connectedness, right, that is happening at a level that's not directly perceivable all the time.
Yeah. And, people always just take it on board that it's a form of dualism, but it's actually a form of non-dualism, which kind of makes sense, because, and I understand that our language is laden with dualistic sort of meanings and everything. And really all our meaning and purpose and everything like that is found through a dualistic experience, but then the dualism sort of collapses in on itself to non-dualism, which leads you to idealism kind of more naturally. And, because it could lead you to materialism, I guess, but then materialism inherits these problems to explain, it's all these other things. So, yeah, and it's a very eye-opening experience when you sort of dig deeper into these concepts rather than, because and also one thing I noticed with a lot of people is people think that their non-interest is a rebuttal to your understandings. It's almost like, what's the big deal? And that proves that your shit is bullshit. It's like, it's like, it's easy to say that coming from someone who's never really looked into it. It's almost like how atheists like to say to theists, your not understanding science isn't a refutation.
Well, I feel like that's just one of the reasons why all three of us eventually, got out of that angry atheist stage. It's just, it doesn't lead anywhere.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Exit Music says, hold on. Oh, hold on. Calling experience dualistic is circular reasoning.
Bro, what?
What the hell? Exit Music, you're always saying stuff that's just out there, man. Why don't you just call in and explain yourself? Because I never know what to make of your statement.
It's hard to interpret that charitably, dude. I don't know.
Like I know, it's like I know what circular reasoning is, and I'm just like trying to figure out how calling experience. I don't know.
Maybe it's a deepity.
The comment section. The comment section is undefeated, dude.
Yeah, man, for real. Well, let me get out of here, guys. I gotta eat and do my things and stuff. But appreciate you calling in, Alex and Nell, and all you guys in the live.
It's nice to meet both of you. I appreciate it.
Oh, hell yeah, man. Nice to meet you too, man.
I'll have to check out your channel.
Yeah, and again, subscribe, like his videos. Please check him out, man. It's a really cool channel. Reality Gone Mental, Alex K. Just check him out, man. It's really good stuff. And
I appreciate it. Y'all take it easy.
All right, brother. We'll see you guys. Y'all have a great weekend.
Bye.
Later, Neil.